All right. So in my rewilding process of life, have had cows as a symbol of nature and the opposite of city living, to be fair. The few times I've found myself in nature, though, and I try to pet a cow through a fence or something, it hasn't really worked. So when a few months ago on a whale trip in Tonga, I met Em, and she was a cow farmer, the light bulbs are going off in my head. Oof, maybe this is my opportunity to pet cows, finally. Now, we're getting along over a few days. Like most kind people, they offer you to stay at their place. Oh, if you're ever in town, blah, blah, blah. And of course, she lives in the middle of nowhere. So I'm like, careful. I will go out of my way if it involves getting the opportunity to pet cows. She's, yeah, I'd love to have you. I'm like, okay. So fast forward a few months, and I'm on this big podcasting road trip up to Sydney and back. And I hit her up. I'm like, can I stay? Can I pet the cows? And she's like, yeah. So it was great. And this conversation was really illuminating what it's like to be young in rural Australia. That's just something I've never really personally been exposed to. What even are cows? It's shocked me how different they are to dogs and cats, which are animals I guess I'm more used to. And even other wild animals, they kind of sit somewhere in between. It's a really interesting thing. And then, like, weird stuff. What's dating like in the countryside? The effects of droughts. I mean, all this modern technology and systems that operate quite clearly in finance and business and construction are operating just as much in agriculture. And this might just be shining a light on my own ignorance, but who knows? Maybe you're in some areas just as ignorant as I am. So, yeah, enjoy all this stuff from M. Hurst.
All
All right.
right. It's happening.
It's happening after a day of me being a cow farmer.
Yeah,
So
it's real. You're a proper cowboy now.
I know, look at this place, it's unreal. And I mean, for context, there's how many cows are there here? 50?
Yeah, 50.
50 cows just lined up here behind the camera.
Yeah, they're going to be here pretty soon.
Yeah, no, I look forward to it. All right, M. Hurst, thanks for
Hey.
coming on. Hi. um, as a bloke who's lived in the city all his life and is, in a sense, saying to himself that he's rewilding,
Mhm.
and figuring out kind of base realities of this world. But I think this experience has shown me that so far from, that being a natural thing and you having grown up in a farm are so naturally in that. The one thing just being around cows that has really stood out to me is that I've always thought of myself as great with animals.
Mm.
Dogs, cats, rabbits, whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? But they're all pets. And then
Yeah.
these cows are so different and just
Mm.
operate on such a different level, their anatomy, whatever their behavior. What to you, having dogs and cows,
Yeah.
might make a mental bridge for people, is the main difference that you go about with between dogs and cows?
It's a really hard one. I think it's one of the things is just you have a completely different relationship with them. I love cattle. I love being around cattle. But they don't interact on the level that dogs are going to connect and interact with you.
Yeah.
When you have dogs, whether it's a pet and they are, a part of the family, they're living with you, you're very involved in, almost every minute of their day type thing. Like
Yeah.
you are their world. Whereas cattle just exist and you get to come into their world and you leave their world, but they are still, they've got a family, they've got the herd, they've got everything out on their own. It's kind of
Yeah.
a very different kettle of fish. But I mean, like for somebody living, I guess in the city.
Because we don't even, I mean, people maybe talk about that a bit more with cats. Like
Yep.
cats are kind of doing their own thing
Yeah.
compared to dogs, but cows are on another level. And one thing that struck out to me was dogs and cats are predators, but
Yep.
cows are prey.
Yep.
Have you noticed a difference there in?
Oh, massively. I think it's the same as like anytime you're working with an animal that is a herbivore, in the wild. And I mean, cows have been domesticated. Like cows could not exist in the wild. That's not an option for them anymore. But they're herbivores. I mean, you look over in Africa, you look at gazelle, you look at antelope and, anything like that. It's all about a difference in fight and flight.
Yeah.
And I think every creature in the world has those, instincts. And it's just sort of how we internalize them, and it's how we use them in, your day-to-day life, is that's what's going to be so different. And as you said, dogs, cats, they're that much further up the food chain. Obviously, they're not going to go out and eat cows or anything like that. And, out here, cows aren't particularly taking our dogs very seriously unless they're actually on duty and pretending to work.
Sure.
But yeah, it does mean that, if typically given the option, your cows are going to flee rather than stick around and fight. Your cows, if you give them the space, if you give them the option, they want to move away.
It's just, it's a completely different thing. Like I've just been, you've seen me taking so many notes on what the hell even is a cow, because they look adorable and stuff, but again, they operate on such a thing. I've got a few ones.
Yeah.
I mean, what do they do when it's raining?
They just still stand around eating grass. I mean, they have to be eating, they're not
cop it?
small animals. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If it's really bad weather or anything like that, we're sitting under one of the beautiful trees here, and they've got, this sort of shelter to stand under. But, they're at the end of the day, they're not wild animals, but they are animals that live outside all of the time. And, if you took away that, I mean, there are obviously going to be times and spaces when the weather is really bad, and we don't have to worry about that here in Australia so much. But, over in Canada is a great example that when it snows over there and you're talking, meters deep and, it's awful. Like, they'll typically bring the cattle in closer to home, and they'll have big windbreaks, and they'll have, areas to kind of try and prevent that weather from impacting the cattle negatively.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, your cattle they're outside animals. That's, they wouldn't want to be inside any more than we'd want them inside, because they would feel confined, they'd feel stuck. And no, I think I was going to say, you're getting snuck up on here pretty quickly. But
I'm just going to sound like such an idiot, but I'm going to keep on asking cow questions, because I really don't know anything. What is the deal with mooing?
So just like we talk, just like, that's a way they communicate, and they've got...
And the guys were mooing as well, I thought.
Yeah, no, everyone moves. So cattle are one of the, the species of animals where there aren't, in Angus cattle anyway, like there aren't big differences between bulls and females when it comes to, they all moo, they all make noise, they are a herd, they work together as a mob, they go together.
Yeah.
And, whether it's a bull or whether it's a female, it's not really going to make a big difference in a lot of the behaviours you see.
Okay, yeah, because there's so many things I just didn't know. Most of my cow knowledge is probably from cartoons or something. I don't even know where it is. Bulls without horns, that's also new.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got Angus cattle here. So all of our cows, the breed itself has been bred and they've never had horns. So bulls and females don't have horns. And in a lot of breeds, again, like you'll have females that do have horns and males that do have horns. Yeah. That's not a gendered difference in cattle.
Yeah, right.
So where it is in, like antelope or something like that, where, you do have the bucks that do have, really impressive racks or really impressive horns. Cattle don't have that difference. Anyone can grow that.
Yeah, that's right. Even the words cattle or cows or beef.
Yes.
What's all that? Do you have no idea about what's going
absolutely.
on there?
So I would say typically I'm a cattle farmer, and specifically I'm a beef cattle farmer.
Okay.
And so that means that the cattle that we have here, they're in the beef supply chain.
Okay, yeah.
They are bred for their meat, and they are going to go eventually, and not just these cattle specifically, but every animal that is kind of this breed, and of this type. I was going to say we've got it all happening here. But yeah, at the end of the day, they are part of the red meat industry, and they are going.
So what makes them cattle and not cows?
So cattle is the equivalent of humans.
Okay.
Cows are the equivalent of females or women. Bulls are the equivalent of men.
Oh, okay. So
it's so you can say, you've got people, you've got humans.
Right.
Cattle is your overarching.
So if you have
everything.
a group of like males and females, they're cattle. They're not cows, because only the female are cows.
Yeah.
Far out. That's going to make me look retarded.
Not at all. No. And so like I'm calling, I'm using them interchangeably here because we're in the middle of a herd of cows at the moment. Yeah. So these are all of the big mamas here. They've all got babies.
Yeah.
So they are all females. We don't have any big bulls. They're over in the bull paddocks that you were avoiding earlier.
Sure, yeah.
And yeah, there's a couple of baby bulls. Like, here's a little baby bull.
Oh my God, it's so cute.
So cute.
Yeah, you can see the difference in the shape of the head, hey?
Yeah, usually they do have a little bit of a buffier head. But honestly, at that age,
Yeah, doesn't matter.
there's not an awful lot of difference,
Okay.
in how they're growing up yet.
And one thing that's impossible not to notice if you spend 5 minutes in this paddock is the amount of cow shit
Yeah.
just on the ground, but then they're always peeing or pooing like out of the
Yeah.
back. And they'll often have just their whole backside covered in shit.
Yeah.
What's the go there? Do they wash that? Is that bad for them?
No, I think it's, the exact same as sort of any kind of animal that, when they're out in the rain, that cleans them off a little bit.
Okay. Will they jump into this dam to wash themselves?
They're not interested in washing themselves. They'll go into the dam to go swimming or to go and cool themselves off, but cattle don't like being clean.
But in summer, it'll be weeks without rain, I imagine, no?
I mean, yeah, but that's not an issue necessarily for them. Like, if you look at right behind you, there's one of the cows there that's got dirt all over her head.
Yeah.
And she's very proud that she's put that there herself. That's not accidental. That's her.
Really?
They'll come and stand down, kind of like on the banks of the dam here, and they'll go and rub their heads in dirt because
It's like an Indian bindi dot or something.
I just think they're grubs.
Yeah.
No, they're very funny about it, but no, they quite enjoy it. And I mean, it comes off. That's why they do have thick hair on them. And so it's not like it's sitting straight on their skin and it's not irritating them. I mean, they're eating everything. Honestly.
Okay.
They're eating everything, like all that they're eating it's all natural. It's grass.
Yeah.
It's a lot cleaner than everything we're eating. So it's, what's coming out is so much cleaner and nicer than anything humans are going to be doing.
This is true. And just going back on the dogs thing, because, I mean, I've been in a workplace where we literally did a business presentation on the predator mindset.
Yeah.
Right? And I think humans relate so much more on many levels with predators and dogs and whatever else. Are there life lessons you've learned from spending time around cows as prey, as pack animals, off the top of your head?
I don't know whether it's necessarily life lessons that you learn from them, but I think it's something that you just sort of, you see the relationships they have, because they do form relationships and they do have a hierarchy. So I'd say, honestly, more of the lessons you're going to be learning from them. It's honestly just on, I guess, kind of how important that community is in whatever species you've got, really. I mean, we talk about community as humans, and like we're always looking for that little bit of connection, or, we want to see the best in people. We want to see what other people are doing. And we want to become friends with them type thing. And I think it's really cool. I mean, you can see we're sitting in the middle of a paddock here. None of these cows are, except for Exclaim down there, really, none of them are really tamed or...
Oh, this one's just put a lot of mud or shit on it.
Yeah. But yeah, like, the cows here, like, they are so curious about us. They want to know what's going on, and they're here for a sticky beak. And I think that's one of my favorite things about them. Is like, you go sit down in a paddock and invariably they're going to come up for a bit of a look to say, who are you? What are you doing here?
I mean, even before we were here for a couple hours, and there was a real sense of, this applies, I guess, to most animals, but as you say, these cows are living their own lives as opposed to dogs. They're so in the present, they're so uncaring in a sense, and that's also because of the environment you provide for them. Do you feel that if you do get caught up in the humdrum of human society and internet, maybe in particular, it always does you a world of good to come sit with the cows for a bit?
No question. I think it's very much, I mean, wherever you are, I feel like when you go for a big walk outside after you've had, whether it's a long day at work, whatever that looks like for you. And I'm just fortunate that, like my long walk after work can be through these paddocks and whatnot. And I think it's just sort of, it's one of those ones that I really love. And I think, animals on a large scale, they just have that incredible ability to kind of make you feel small and make you feel, your place in the universe. And I mean, we were just over in Tonga, and I think, to a very different extent that whales do that incredibly, that, you've got this 40-ton animal that comes up and they want to interact with you. They're interested. They're like, you can see them thinking, you can see the thoughts behind their eyes going, like, what are you? Who are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and absolutely. When it comes to stress relief or anything like that, like, you can just go, and I think being outside does you the world of good, but being to be able to be outside with cows is unreal because, yeah, you can just go and lie down and they'll come over and, they are searching for that. Like, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, what are we up to?
And I guess you'll have a bias because these are what you've grown up with, and not to put others down, but in what way are cows different to other livestock, to sheep or?
I think they're just very different mentalities. So cows, because of the size of them, when you were talking about like the fight or flight sorts of reflexes, you've got animals that are, at the end of the day, if they had to fight, they're able to hold their own.
Yeah.
And again, you can kind of see who the matriarchs in the herd are, who the boss is. Like, you can see that sort of pecking order. And so when, one of basically the boss cows decide we're going over here, everyone follows.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're with sheep or something like that, there's a lot more of everyone kind of decides to go together. Like,
Right.
And I am not a sheep farmer at all personally, but
You say that with a bit of for good reason, though.
I think honestly, sheep and the sheep that I've been working with, I've worked with sheep in the past, but it was a little bit more, if you have a fence and you want to make sure your sheep aren't going to get through, get a bucket of water and throw the water at the fence and find where the holes, like where the water gets through, and everywhere the water gets through, a sheep can get through.
What, water gets through?
Yeah, sheep will get through anything.
What, how?
No, they get through anything. They just decide they're going there, and they can be a little bit bloody minded.
Okay.
No, they're, for the most part, they're beautiful animals.
Yeah.
They just run very, very differently. Like, sheep will almost always run away from you. So, for something like that, where if you need to move them into a paddock, you kind of have to start at the gate and walk backwards to the back of the mob.
Yeah.
So even if you're trying to push them that way, you need to start where you're pushing them and walk past them all, so they all know they need to turn around and run away from you.
Okay, yeah.
Because if these few are still trying to get back that way, everyone will just be like, oh, they're the ones we're following.
Right.
So there's not necessarily that much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a very different sorts of just different, honestly. It's definitely, you're not going to be, I think it's all, it's what I've grown up with, but it's what you're comfortable with. And I think I understand cattle a lot better than I understand sheep.
Yeah.
And I just enjoy working with them a lot more than I enjoy working with sheep. I don't like, at the end of the day, I like that they're hardy. I like that they can look after themselves a bit, whereas, you've got to look after sheep that much more, which isn't a bad thing at all, but it's just sort of making sure that they,
Got a chorus.
I was going to say, we've got everybody chatting right around us.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, cool.
Thanks, girls. Good chat.
Yeah, okay. Well, I could keep on just asking every question I have about cows, but probably...
You are welcome to.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to talk about cows.
Okay, maybe as a segue into farming and whatnot, because obviously everyone knows, and again, I say everyone coming from city, everyone knows different steak cuts. There's the brisket and the porterhouse and the rest of it.
Yeah.
But when you buy a steak, you don't, I guess I know Angus, but you don't think about what breed of cow it is. Is that even relevant for meat?
Yeah, so I think it's one of the ones that it more comes into like branding and marketing.
Okay.
Really, that there are definitely going to be some breeds of cattle that are potentially, like a Wagyu.
Yeah.
They are higher marbling. And so a Wagyu steak.
And marbling being fat.
Marbling being the fat that is within the meat.
So how does that even happen?
So, I mean, I think, everybody, it's just, like, when you look at a muscle, if you look at a really lean muscle, there's going to be less fat. So if you look at a kangaroo, there's hardly any fat within that meat.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at different types of cattle, you're looking at the amount of fat that is within the meat. Okay. And different breeds will have more of that. So
as opposed to just sitting on top.
Yeah, so you'll see normally on your steak, if you go and buy just your normal steak, you've got your steak there and you'll have the fat around the outside. And you'll see there are little bits of white throughout it. Those little bits of white are fat in the meat. Yeah. And you want a little bit of fat in the meat, and the more fat in the meat, typically, the more flavour, for sure, the more tender it is. A Wagyu, for instance, it will have an awful lot of white right throughout that meat, which will make it really expensive.
But then when you go to and just buy a normal steak, are they all different? Because other than
They'll be all different breeds.
other
Yeah,
than Lagan
absolutely.
and Angus, I don't know any other cow breeds.
Yeah, no, so absolutely. So there are, some sort of like 50 something breeds,
Yeah.
probably substantially more, honestly. Breeds of cattle. There are so many different breeds, but like at the end of the day, what you're breeding for, or, every breed has different things that you're trying to, or that they're trying to do. And so, one of the things that Angus did really well, all of the cattle are all black.
Okay. Why is that good?
So that was more just consistency in the leather, consistency in that side of things.
Yeah.
But it was also one that, when it kind of gets into other breeds, you're looking at different traits. So you're going to go the Brahman cattle. They're the really big ones with a big hump on the back of the neck,
like
and they're
India
up in Queensland.
Australia.
India, they've got Zebu. There are a whole bunch of different breeds that are bred specifically to work really well in those areas.
Just in a hotter environment.
Which is in a hotter environment. So they've got slick skin. They've got really sort of a very different hair type to these guys who have kind of more fluff.
Yeah.
They've got really slick skin, which will help reduce the impact of ticks. It's going to help reduce the impact of the heat on them because they're not going to be sweating through everything. Like there's a lot of different, I guess, kind of pros and cons.
So, because that all makes sense, and I guess similar to dogs.
Yeah.
Has that all been human intervention? Like genetics, essentially?
Yeah, so I honestly, this is one I probably couldn't tell you. Okay. I think it was sort of, the variety in the breeds now has absolutely been a lot of human intervention. Yep. We've kind of gone through and like I'm talking recently being the last, few thousand years. Like people have been farming with cattle for thousands of years. Like we're not talking, when the Brits first came over to Australia type thing. Like we're talking a very long time because, the Egyptians, they used beef cattle, or they used, cattle to help them farm in other ways, whether that was, if you go through, sort of South and Central America, like you're still seeing.
I don't think they had any beasts of burden.
They do, yeah, absolutely.
But I don't think they did.
They plow. They use plows.
Yeah, but I think before
in Peru,
Spanish, they didn't have.
No. Sorry, no. I'm not saying like as a natural thing, but like they have brought them, and again, that is definitely in the last few hundred years.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think it's definitely one that there have been beasts of burden for a very long time, kind of throughout the world.
Yeah.
And how they permeate is just different to the needs you're looking for. I mean, you're going to see, when we were over in Peru and seeing like the cattle that they had over there, they were very different to what we're breeding here. They're breeding dual purpose, so that the one animal will be able to, at one point will end up being meat, but throughout its life can give milk. Wow, and I mean, you saw today trying to milk that cow that they didn't really like that idea very much. And again, you can definitely do it, but you'd have to kind of go, okay, let's keep the baby away for that bit longer and kind of time when you're milking them better. I mean, we just sort of went, hey, let's go now.
Yeah. So it's a real art. And I guess my question is, I know all dog breeds, and at least my very limited knowledge came from basically wolves or dingoes or these kind of African wild dogs maybe. Cows, the only ones I can think of off the top of my head are maybe bison and aurochs.
Honestly, like the domestication of livestock is not something I've kind of looked into, and now I'm thinking I definitely probably should have.
Yeah.
No, I think it's just one of those ones that, we've been able to kind of go, pick the traits we like, pick the traits that work for us. And, for cattle like the Angus cattle, they are, they're fast growing, they're hardy. We're a cold country down here.
Yeah.
And so, right throughout winter, they're loving it. They've got a really thick coat on them. And so they're just like, yep, this is great. Thank you. Like if you see cows out in the snow, they think it's the best day ever.
Really?
Yeah, they love it. They're ridiculous. Kick their little heels up and go running around, and it's quite funny.
And then summer comes and they've slicked it.
Summer comes and they start just sort of like molting and shedding. And I mean, honestly, if you think dogs shed badly, go and hang out with a herd of cows. And It's always really funny at this time of year because we've got a lot of birds making nests, and you'll see them all lined with cow hair, and they're quite happy with themselves.
For
Honestly,
sure.
they've
Do
got
they
like a
go? Have
nice
you
little.
seen birds go on a cow and pick it off?
Oh yeah, yeah. Or they'll, I mean, the cows will go and they'll sort of scratch on the side of a tree or something like that. Yeah, and you'll absolutely just see the birds go in afterwards and go, "Yep,
That's
like that's
crazy.
perfect, thank you."
See, this is the thing. I mean, I don't know how interesting this is to anyone else, but cows molting and just no idea. Like, okay, even that if you talk about breeding them for separate purposes,
Mhm.
you guys are breeding them specifically for beef, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But then I've heard obviously dairy and then genetics. You said as well.
Yeah. So absolutely.
So is that the three options you've kind of got?
Well, you've got beef and dairy.
Okay.
So genetics are literally just genetics for whatever your chosen.
So is that literal sperm? Like
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sperm, ovum, eggs,
Oh,
embryos, everything.
Okay. How do you even get that? How would you get an egg or an ovum?
You've got to so you're going through and you'll have basically a vet come up. And they go through and they will kind of give the cow hormones basically to help her cycle.
Okay.
It just sort of helps sync the natural cycle and it doesn't do anything negative to them because it's literally hormones that already exist in the body.
Okay.
You're just introducing it at a different time.
Yeah. Like a kind of a birth control pill.
Yeah, basically
scenario.
it's basically kind of like a morning after pill, more or less.
Okay.
And then they'll start cycling and then you'll get a vet or a tech. They'll be able to come in and they basically, once the cows sort of started cycling and producing these eggs, they can more or less go up and suck them. Like it's like a little vacuum cleaner thing. It's probably the easiest way.
Out of the vagina?
Yeah. It's the same, like IVF for cows is that's how we started IVF
Is
for
that
humans.
how it works in humans?
Yeah.
That's a whole nother kettle of fish. But
yeah, and I mean, it can be.
I thought it might be a surgery or something.
No, absolutely not.
So it just kind of falls out. You suck them up.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. So like the eggs will come out of the fallopian tubes.
Do you know if are they microscopic or are they like, can you see them?
Yeah, well, like you look at them under a microscope to check that they've been, yes, they've been fertilized.
It's not like little caviar popping out of cows.
No, it's not one like that. No, you're not going to be able to go and find cow eggs around.
Yeah.
The same.
Yeah, okay.
No, but like that's something that all mammals do. That's not a cow specific thing. That's definitely, humans, sheep, cows, dogs, anything and everything.
Right. So you're harvesting genetics, essentially an IVF.
Yeah.
There's a lot going into this, isn't there?
Yeah.
And that's just to, again, continue on that tradition of breeding the cows with the best meat or the best
so you kind of go through
abilities.
and you're trying to pick, the best. You want the best, you're all trying to breed the perfect animal and it's sort of hard to get.
It's real Nazi shit, isn't it?
It's a little bit. Yeah. It is. I mean, we're a little bit kinder about our methodology, absolutely. Yeah. But no, I think it's, you just kind of go through and you're like, alrighty, these are the best animals. And, what we kind of do is like the people over in the US, for example, or Canada, they've got, really good bull or a really good female that we're like, oh, we want those genetics. We can now buy them, get them shipped over to Australia and we'll put them in our cows. So like we've got Canadian genetics and American genetics, running around our paddocks.
So how does that actually work? You're sitting here in New South Wales and you see an Instagram photo or something or hear someone talk about how much milk this cow produced in Canada and you're like, I want some of that.
Yeah. So again, like ours isn't necessarily milk because we're beef cattle.
Sure. This steak I had and it came from this farm in Canada and you got to try it. Like what?
Yeah. So it's more, you're kind of looking at the whole animal. So you're going, okay, the structure's really good. So you want them built to last.
What does
so
that
structure meaning like, your bones, like you're built right. Yeah. Basically, your bones are all in the right area. You're not standing with your front feet like that or like that.
What the
and
Americans
you're not
would call
standing.
a D1 athlete. Like.
Yeah, exactly. So you want them, kind of built kind of like a table. You want them really square. You want them nice and big.
Okay.
You also want them really deep. So you want them to be able to have a lot of meat. They need to be able to last because, we've got hills here.
Did you say deep?
Deep, like really, from the back to the belly is, there's a lot of animal there basically.
Yeah. It's all different. It's all horizontal, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. But so you're trying to go for, those sorts of things. And when you're able to go, and I mean, a lot of it's more scientific now that we've got, kind of like DNA traits that you can actually measure and say, okay, this animal is more likely to produce more milk. This animal's more likely, to produce a better calf or to have a smaller calf type things. Like, if you've got small cows or if you've got heifers, you can really carefully control the animals you're joining them with so that it's going to be an easier time for them.
Okay.
But yeah, so basically, like if I look at that, I see there's a really cool bull over in Canada.
So real quick, heifer.
Heifer is a cow before she's had her first baby. So a heifer, so you've got, when you're looking at cattle, you've got cows are girls,
Yep.
bulls are boys,
Yep.
heifers are young girls, basically, until they have their first calf. Bulls are bulls the whole time.
Okay.
But then if you get a neutered bull, they're called a steer. And so that is like what we'll do with a lot of our like meat market will be a lot of steers because you won't, like, testosterone does not make the meat taste good. So
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah, so there's a lot of different hormones, there's a lot of different things that'll impact meat taste, and there's scientists that their entire job is to try and figure out how do we make the best meat that's going to take taste the best for people. And so there's a whole bunch of different things that go into it, and you'll see grain fed versus grass fed, and you'll see there's specific grains that people will feed or something like that.
So what? Yeah, that's I guess a good question. What actually makes going through the science of making the best steak? What's the good variables? Is grass better than grain?
That's a whole argument that will depend entirely on who you talk to.
Okay. So there's no clear thing that everyone's aiming for. Like
no, there's no one solid answer. I think it's also a very personal thing. I mean, what I think is delicious is not what everybody thinks is delicious.
Sure.
And so they're going to go through, so it's called the MLA, which is Meat and Livestock Australia. And they go through and they sort of work with like Meat Standards Australia, and they'll go through and basically try and create the best steak they can. So they'll go, okay, like at what age, what age do they taste the best, and what do they eat that's making them taste better? What environments? So like a really big one is like stressed animals. Like if you're putting stress hormones through the meat, that will make them taste awful. Like you'll see them when you actually look at the steak, you can see a really, really dark steak. We call them dark cutters.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's when they're, if they've been stressed or, they are anxious or anything like that, they will typically, like you will be able to tell in the meat that they have been.
Is that,
would
the darkness
animal.
Come from blood or?
No, not necessarily. So the blood itself, like the steak you're looking at, there's no blood left in that. Like the steak.
What?
Well, like there's a little bit, but like the steak that you're looking at, like that is what the muscle looks like.
Okay.
That is muscle. That is not, you're not getting a thing of blood.
Shank of flesh, yeah.
So you're getting like in the steak, like the aeration, how long it's been oxidized for, like how much
because people
exposed it's been. And I'm like, if you leave a steak, or if mince is probably the easiest example. If you leave a thing of raw mince in your fridge, not in an airtight container, if it's raw, you'll see it being, really bright and red on day one.
Okay.
If it's not in an airtight container, kind of like by day 3, you'll see it going a lot browner.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed except the amount of oxygen.
So that's not getting cooked. That's just...
No, like that happens when it's cooked.
Yeah.
But like if you literally just leave like a bowl of raw meat in your fridge, 3 days later, it'll look a lot browner.
Okay.
And it'll be a different color.
And is that good, bad, indifferent?
It doesn't matter. And like, it's sort of one of those ones, like it's definitely better to have it fresher. Because, just leaving it in your fridge isn't how we go through aging meat.
For sure, yeah.
There's a whole different thing there that it's way above my pay grade.
I know, like this all feels such things that I just never think about. Like, and I said this to you at the start, and I feel maybe slightly less ignorant than the average, but that's probably not true.
That's right. I think we all feel that.
Yeah, I've met kids in suburbs of Melbourne who think meat comes from the supermarket because for their whole life that is.
Yeah, that's where they've got it from.
So a steak in Woolworths.
Yeah.
Quickly breaking it down, it's kind of from... What does that actually look like when it's on the cow? Is it a male or female usually? Is it from almost all of them come from this place in Australia? Like, what's the...
It's from all over Australia. So like the meat you're seeing in Woolworths, like our supermarkets have a really good buying process. So they're not going and looking for the, for the low end of things. They're not going to go and try and buy you just the cheapest cattle they can get.
Okay.
They'll typically go through and they go and actually not necessarily on farm, but sometimes on farm or at the sale yards. They'll go through and they'll actually select the animals that they pick. And then those animals will either be going to a feedlot or straight to the abattoirs. They'll be processed, and then after the abattoirs, that will be sent out to a supermarket. So it's a lot less about, there's no guarantee. Like you wouldn't be able to look at a piece of meat and go, oh, this is a female from, Northern Territory or something like that.
So these shows, these feedlot, is that what they're called? Feedlots?
So they're two so there are feedlots, yeah.
Okay. So if I work for Woolworths, I'm going and there's this show and I see one cow, I think that's good, give me 1,000 of them kind of thing from that farmer. And then they organise that behind the scenes, put them to feedlots. Yeah,
so they can do that. So
just trying to work it.
No, absolutely. So what you're talking about are the livestock shows. So just for a little bit of context for everyone else, that's at like our royal shows. So Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Canberra, all of these shows have a livestock section.
Yeah.
And it used to be exactly that, we would be able to come and you'd take your cows to go, I've got the best cows. And people would make those purchasing decisions based on what you were bringing.
Sure.
And they would go, oh, okay, yeah, they really, the judge liked their cow best. They obviously have the best cows. Therefore, I do want to go and buy their genetics. I want to go buy their animals, or I want to go and buy steers or heifers or something from them.
For the meat.
Yeah. And, like now, because we've got online marketing, we've got so many different avenues as well. But that is that is definitely still how it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
What we're sort of trying to do now is basically, we give these buyers as many options as they can to get in, to come and have a look at different cows, to come and have an idea on, like where they're selecting from, and they can, like they are working for a specific market. So they know that, their buyers might be wanting more Wagyu type animals, or they might be wanting, specific cuts or specific styles or, whatever that looks like.
So,
and they'll kind of buy based on that.
So back in the day, it could be, back in the day, I guess supermarkets were less of a thing. It was more individual butchers. I imagine they would have had wholesale middlemen that themselves are going to, back in the day, those shows. Now is it, the supermarkets have a huge chain, at least in Australia. Are they going direct to farms?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I was sort of getting towards. Like the shows they're an event. Like we love going to them. They're a really great showcase for beef in Australia, but that's not kind of where a lot of the buying happens anymore.
Okay, where does it?
But the show is like a really good introduction to the people, or to some of the people. A lot of the buying will kind of happen either direct from the farm to the business. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a bigger farm, if you're able to produce animals more regularly, if you go, okay, cool, like twice a year, I'm able to produce 100 steers or 100 of these animals. Then Coles or Woolworths might go, yep, cool, we know we're going to get 100 animals from you twice a year.
Okay.
Or they might go, to some of the big places in Queensland, they might be getting 10,000 animals. Like there's, and again, like they're not likely to be getting that all in once, but they'll kind of balance supply and demand, basically. They go, okay, cool, like we have a quota that we need to have X amount of animals per week. Where are we getting them from? Yeah. And they'll go to the local sale yards. So like Yass has one, there's a lot of sort of, sale yards around Australia, and that's where a lot of the sort of just general buying and selling goes.
I'm imagining some guy in a cowboy hat standing up almost like an auction.
Yeah.
Is that how it looks?
Yeah, more or less. Absolutely. So you'll have all of the cattle are going to be penned, and you might have a few hundred, a few thousand, depending on
in the yard and yass.
In the yard and yass, yep. And they'll have them all in separate yards, so they're all going, okay, cool. This group of cattle are basically either the same age, the same size, whatever that is that they're going to be selling them on, and then buyers will be able to go through and say, yep, cool, that meets the specs that I'm trying to match. I want to buy those cows, and then it becomes an auction for that pen. So
of 10 or 100.
Of 10 or of however many they're selling them at.
So can I right now go to Yass and buy a cow?
It's, Wednesday today? So you'd have to wait till tomorrow, but yeah.
Okay. And how much does a cow go for?
That
I'm
is
sure it's a huge variable,
huge
but
variations.
just, I mean, that cow, if that was on sale in Yass, how much is that?
Yeah, so like if you're looking at selling, these sort of a bigger cows, so they're about that sort of 650 kilos weight, and depending on, like, it's usually sold in dollars per kilo.
Okay.
So like, you can make anywhere from sort of 1,800 to 2,500, $3,000 per animal.
$3 to $5 a kilo.
Yeah, once they're sort of, if they're hung on that, that would be about that. If you're going on, yeah, like it definitely depends. Like if you're, trying to go on live weight, obviously it's a little bit different, but
So that's dead weight.
That's dead weight. That's, yeah, you're
with all the
paying
blood out.
about that much for meat, basically.
Okay. Oh, that's not bad. Because, this would be a lot.
Hey, mama.
She is ran up here, eh?
It's a steep hill there.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Wow, this is, I mean, yeah, I don't know how this is sounding, but this is such an interesting thing. Okay, you've mentioned a few times. Obviously, this is a farm. How many animals do you mind me asking?
We've got about 100 here at the moment.
Okay, cool. What's the difference in your eyes and perspective and experience between, I guess, a farm, at least in the Australian context, and a station, like a cattle station? These 10,000 in Queensland.
I don't think it's. I mean, in my mind, it's definitely. I'm like, stations happen up north. Stations like they're in Queensland, the Territory, even out west of us, like West New South Wales.
You hear crazy stories of helicopters and
absolutely.
size of Belgium, one of them apparently.
Yeah. No, there's definitely some big, like, huge areas that they're covering. I mean, like, I went to college with a guy who was, his family ran 2 million acres. Like, it's huge.
1 million acres. 2 million acres.
2 million. Like, it's huge. It's crazy land. Like, you can't conceptualize that. Like, I can't easily.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I would call that more stations, but also there's no, proper definition of, you have to be X amount of size or in these locations. And
but if we like kind of all know roughly where the border is, what's the main difference? They would not be able to sit around with their cows and, again, be helicoptering around.
I mean, I think it's like, that's just a size thing. I mean, there are definitely some of those places up there that do have, mobs of cattle that you could go and sit in with. Like, that would be absolutely fine.
So it's more or less the exact same operation, just on a
huge
bigger scale.
Yeah. Like, I mean, we're here with, a couple 100 acres and 100 head of cows, and that's all I need. That's all we need. But yeah, it's also one that I'm like, if you're trying to do it, it runs on economy of scale, that once you start getting more people involved, once you're starting to doing more running, it gets a lot easier. Like the first little bit is really hard.
Yeah.
And then, kind of once you're stepping up, like, not that it's ever going to be necessarily easy, but, when you've already got the yard set up and you've already got, your processes in place and you've got people lined up to do the jobs you need them to do, then you can kind of go, okay, cool. Like, rather than just getting them to come out once for 100 head, you can get them to come out twice.
Yeah.
And they'll do double. Like,
because I imagine even just that buying thing, right? Coles comes to you guys and, okay, we can buy 30, or we can go up there, spend a bit more time and money, but we get 10,000.
Yeah.
That's way
Yeah,
smoother,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think it's sort of one of the ones, like with us specifically here on our farm, we are typically breeding the cattle for genetics.
Okay.
So we are selling bulls is our primary source of income.
Yep.
And so we're trying to breed the best animals that we can breed so that we breed the best bulls we can breed, which is why we import genetics, which is why we're looking at, we look at different areas. We go, okay, what can we use to make our product the best we can do? And then we'll sell it locally. We'll sell it to, whether it's local producers or people just kind of, they're all fairly local for us, but within a couple of 100 kilometers type thing. Like, you'll sell your bulls there, and then the genetics that you've grown are now going to positively impact their herd.
Okay, so if a cow costs $2-3 grand, how much does an egg cost, or a sperm?
So for an embryo, you're kind of looking, and it'll depend on the quality of the animal, but basically like 1,200 to $2 grand.
And it's probably more than just one.
No, that'd be one.
Yeah, but you can get.
Yeah, you can buy multiple, and I mean, like, one of the things that's really cool at the moment. So, we're seeing sort of like a really big uptick in IVF. It's becoming more accessible on farm.
Okay.
So like Vitelli, they're a group that kind of do a lot of that, and they'll go out on farm, and basically be able to take out a lot of eggs, take them back to, their labs and do the fertilization there. Like it's
Okay,
in
so you
lab
don't need to have a
environments.
syringe of sperm just injecting it into.
Well, you don't even need to do any of that on farm. If you're doing like the IVF side, like they'll do that all for you, which is amazing. But it then means that, you're able to get one cow and, she might produce 100 eggs. She might produce 20 eggs. Like it depends, how on the animal basically.
But it's more than just one.
But it's more than just one. And then you're able to go, okay, cool. Like now I've got this many eggs ready to go of my best cow. And so you're really able to improve the genetics of your herd really quickly, like rather than having just 20, one really good baby and 19 babies that are, good, but not as good. You could potentially have 20 babies that are all of that amazing cow.
Does that mean in that circumstance, your whole next generation is basically all mothered by the same person?
And fathered by the same one.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So they'd be all full siblings.
Do you have problems with interbreeding, ancestral stuff?
No, I think it's definitely one like you're conscious of it. I mean, you're aware of it. So like we're not just running all of our cows together all of the time. Like we've got our herds
if they're
of
all
bulls.
siblings, I guess if you continue every
generation,
generation,
you're bringing in new things. So like the younger girls that we have in this paddock here, we've got their brothers up in those paddocks there, but we sell their brothers.
Yeah.
So they go off farm. And then, if we'll either buy in a bull, which is, obviously typically a fairly large investment, but it's something that you go, we're committing to using this for the next couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah, we're committing to using this. We're able to use him to hopefully, we've brought good genetics from somewhere else, so they're going to boost ours up again.
Yeah.
But then his babies would effectively be unrelated to him.
Sure.
And so he can, go over his, again, like we don't breed. Like one of the things that is really cool with a lot of the breed societies, and again, it's kind of looking at the science side, but they'll actually come up with like an inbreeding coefficient. So they'll be able to say, if we did this and this, what percentage?
Wow.
How much trouble you go to get into type thing. And I mean, it's definitely one of those ones that you go, okay, cool. Like that way you can just keep track of, oh, okay, cool. We better not put those two together because, they're related way back on, both of their mums happen to be related. Yeah,
because you might not know that the farm you bought that bull from has also used the similar genetics that you did a few years ago.
And that's it. I mean, when you're buying the bulls, you're given the pedigree. So, 4, 5, 6 generations back.
Yeah. See, this is the thing. It's pretty cool because I think farming gets a rap of simple living, which it is, but compared to what's going on in the city, the cutting edge of modern society of building rockets and AI, well, you're just farming cows. But you're kind of still using that level of technology.
Like if you're looking, like the amount of things that have started, like cloning started with like sheep and cattle.
Yeah.
We're in a position that, we get to be at the forefront of so many things, and maybe we don't get, like maybe it's not, public knowledge, but no, I'm like, honestly, the amount of education in agriculture is truly phenomenal. I mean, if you're looking at, like the random things like looking at climate change, for an example, farming was copying the rap that, agriculture was producing a huge percentage of climate change or like, greenhouse gases towards climate change. Agriculture or Australian ag, like they decreased their direct outputs, like greenhouse gas outputs by 60%.
Wow.
From 2000 to I think, or like 99, I think to like 2021 maybe.
Yeah.
Like 66%. Like they were the largest like industry to decrease anything. And that was purely because the people in the industry were like, hey, this is an issue. We want to fix it. What do we do? And so like there are so many different ways that, people are kind of going through and doing it. But the fact that there is that interest there is absolutely the knowledge and understanding there. And it's something that's important to us to.
Well, I think I've just had this thought for the first time, but I think it's so easy to have agriculture as a scapegoat for so many of the modern problems, because in the city where the media is run, where people are talking and whatnot, you have the benefit of kind of getting to say it behind their backs.
Yeah.
In a sense. You can't say lawyers are the worst or bankers are the worst or whatever because
they're
there.
Yeah.
Whereas by definition, farmers are not in the city.
No,
so everyone
but
in the
I think
city can talk shit.
Yeah, but I mean, like we hear all of that, and I think that's the hard thing. Like it's we're sitting there and we're jumping up and down, going like, "Hey guys, like we are making these changes. We are trying to do these things, because like climate change is a good example, like keeping on rolling with that we're going to be the first ones impacted.
Yeah.
Like, how much rain I get in a year directly impacts how much grass is going to grow.
Yeah.
Which directly impacts how many cows we can have on the farm. Like everything we do, which obviously then goes through and means how much income are we able to pull off the farm this year? Oh, we're only able to pull off half the amount because we only got half the amount of rain.
Yeah.
When
so it's that linked, like.
Oh, absolutely. It's
sense,
purely just grass. Like, I mean, we're a grass-fed business, and then if we need to, buy in hay, we'll absolutely buy in hay, but you're not going to go and feed an entire year's worth of cattle to try and keep to that profit. And
the price of hay would go up like that.
Yeah, and it does. And I mean, like, if you look at the last drought, that's a perfect example. Like, it was such an intense, it kind of started so quickly. Like, this is back in 2018, 19.
Okay.
That was such an intense drought that, like normally when we go through drought, it's okay because we'll be able to buy hay from Victoria because they're probably going through a decent year. Or we can buy hay from Queensland because maybe they're going through a better time. But this last drought, like, it was everywhere.
Really?
Everywhere was in drought. I mean, we were buying hay from WA.
Right. I don't think of WA is having much hay.
No, they were at the time. Like, they were having more hay than anyone. And I mean, you were paying insane amounts just to keep everything.
But this is the thing we see.
To keep it going, to keep it running. I mean, like, you didn't have an option. Like, you couldn't sell your cows because no one wanted to buy anything.
No, and you can't just leave them die.
And you can't, no. Like, you care so much about them. I mean, like, like, you look at some of these babies, like, we've had.
They're that bloody cute, I can tell you that.
Oh, they're adorable. But I'm like, we've also had, probably 10 generations of that baby. Like, we've had her mum, we've had her grandma. Like, these cows entirely. And so, like, of course you're not going to want to just let them, just go get by. Like, you're trying to look out for them. But, it's a tough one.
It's strange because at least my experience of the cities, we see this on headlines and whatnot. But I don't think anyone really cares. Like, purely because no one understands.
Yeah.
And I guess, and you briefly spoke about this yesterday. How do you see forming that bridge between city people who think meat comes from a supermarket and might know that it doesn't, but...
Yeah, but don't necessarily know the process or the house.
Understand or really anything, which is me, right? That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
How does that gap get bridged?
Look, I actually think that's probably one of the next big issues in agriculture. I mean, we talk in the industry, like, we talk fairly regularly about, like, what's next, what do we need to be looking out for, and what do we need to be doing. And I mean, one of the big things we're all concerned about is food security. We've got a rising population. We've got, only a set amount of food that is able to be produced. And Australia is really fortunate. Like, I think I looked it up last night to double check my figures. But we actually export almost 77%.
Whoa.
Of the food that we produce, because we are that efficient farmers that we are able to feed, in a normal farm feeds 600 people.
Wow. Yeah. And those ones in Queensland.
Man.
Is that cow going to knock the camera?
Maybe. Shoo.
T2.
T2, she's a brat.
So 77% exported. Wow,
yeah, I think it's something like that. It's a huge amount. And so, we're here and we're able to do, we're able to produce that amount of food, and we're able to do that. But I think it's one of those ones that, like, I think one of the next big things in agriculture. Man.
I wish the selfie camera was also on. That was so funny.
Thank you. Manners. But yeah, like, I think kind of building on from that, one of the big things that, we kind of have next is to, all right, how do we actually communicate the real story in Australian agriculture? And there are some phenomenal people doing some really, really cool work in that space, but it's just about, alrighty, how do we actually get the people who are in the industry and working their butt off to try and, keep it alive and keep it going and do it well? How do we get the right voices in front of everyone? And I mean, there's no one easy answer there. And I think, one of the big things that we kind of need, we can shout it out into the void all day, but you need people in the city to give a shit.
Yeah.
And not that they don't. Like, it's truly just there hasn't been that exposure. Like, you don't know the questions to ask. Like, if we're talking, you're 2 to 3 generations removed from the farm now in general,
What do you mean by that?
So it means like, I've grown up on the farm. My mum grew up on the farm. Her dad and her parents, like it's, we've been involved in agriculture for hundreds of years. Like, and that's amazing to say.
It was only about 100 years ago. Before then, I mean, that's really all there is, right?
No, back in England as well. Like, like my family's done farming for forever. And I think, we go back, it doesn't take that far to go back to be like, okay, cool. There was someone in my family who used to farm.
As in,
so your grandparents or your great grandparents.
Yeah, because my grandparents or great grandparents, and are you saying that basically everyone, whatever they're doing now, it wasn't so many generations ago that they were farming?
No, I think if you look at like on a global scale,
that's a really good point. Yeah,
farming, I think it was like 30 years ago, it was like 1990 on a global scale. Like 45% of the world was involved in agriculture or worked in agriculture.
Yeah.
As of like maybe 2019, I think it was, it's like 20-something%.
Wow, yeah, there's urbanization.
And that's just, people have moved off farm, people, have done that. And so, but it also means then that if you've been living in the city, you don't have that person. If I've got a dumb farm question or if I've got a food question that I'm like, hey, how do steaks get produced? I have people that I can ask that. I have people that I can go, hey, I've got a question that I should probably know the answer to.
Yeah,
but
why
like,
do cows moo?
but I'm like, I don't know the answer to. Hell,
yeah.
I've got people that can ask and that can and will answer because they either know themselves or they are able to help me find that information. Whereas I'm like, if you don't have those connections, if you don't have those links, I mean, how on earth are you expected to know that? And I think, sort of trying to be able to create those bridges is such an important one. And I think there's a lot of people in the right space doing that. It's just sort of going, alrighty, how do we escalate it? How do we get that bigger?
What have you seen? Are there any examples, people, actions, campaigns that you've seen of, more of that right there?
Yeah, honestly, I think one person who does it really, really, really amazingly is a guy called Ollie with Humans of Agriculture.
Okay.
And runs a podcast, does videos, and just like the work that he's doing, it really does, like it's such a cool...
The podcast is called Humans of Agriculture.
Yeah, Humans of Agriculture. Yeah. And it's just, he's getting on and he's going and just kind of doing what you're doing. He goes and he just tells people stories and help showcase them. And I think it's just a really cool way to be like, hey guys, like, I think if you ask a lot of people in the city of what does the normal farmer look like, I think an awful lot of them wouldn't say somebody who looks like me.
No.
And like I think it's one of those ones that if we can kind of help change that, hey guys, like, farmers come in all shapes and sizes, what you're originally thinking isn't necessarily, what we look like anymore.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of negative connotations, racist, sexist, all those connotations that are tied into traditional values and traditional ways of living and being in relationships or whatever, raising children, are all associated quite strongly with farming.
Yeah, and I think I think we definitely get sort of tied with a pretty tough stick there, because if I look at, like some of the small towns I've gone through working in, and I mean, obviously, again, it's not every small town by any means, but there are some towns where you can see a lot more of that kind of lifestyle still exists very strongly.
Yeah.
But I would also then turn around and go, if I look at agriculture and in general, and if I look at the communities and the people that I work with, there are people of all ages and genders and sexuality. And I think a lot of people in farm, like it comes a lot more, if you're a decent person, cool.
Yeah.
I think there's, and I'm absolutely not saying that there isn't racism or there isn't sexism, because unfortunately it is one of those things that it exists and it will exist. But I have definitely felt like I've experienced more sexism, working in the city than I did, out on farms and stuff like that. And again, like absolutely not saying that it doesn't happen, but I don't think it's, my experience anyway, has not been that it's, as negative a thing, or it's as big of a thing everywhere out here, which is sort of a hard one there.
That's interesting. And I think, Maybe even just to wrap that up, like you said something yesterday, I don't know if it just rolled off the tongue for you, but it struck me because you said there's so many people in agriculture that are working hard for the country.
Yeah.
And I often look at jobs in the city, and you can argue about this till the cows come home, but the validity of jobs, and
Yeah.
so many feel like fake jobs. You know, people hate their job because deep down, it's like the Matrix, it's like Fight Club, you know, that 90s genre of I'm going into a cubicle and doing something that's kind of irrelevant and not, maybe it's making someone high up money, but it's just for me to continue existing, to pay my apartment that I don't really like,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just this weird cog in a machine
Yeah.
where people in agriculture are literally making food.
Yeah.
It's the value is so obvious. And then to have all that shit thrown on and maybe not have the recognition that's probably deserved. Does that make even make the pill a bit more bitter?
I think it's one. I mean, look, I think at the end of the day, we're all working jobs to kind of to get by. Like, I run my own business, off farm. I do photography and marketing, and that is what pays my salary. Like, I'm not pulling a salary off the farm. And
Oh,
I
okay,
mean,
really? Yeah.
no, not at this stage. And like the farm pays for itself.
Okay.
And it does make a profit, but the majority of the profit we make off the farm goes back into the farm.
Sure.
And it's an incredible lifestyle. But I think at the end of the day, when people are looking at farmers saying, oh, you're just in it for the money, I'm like, I can make money doing so many other things.
Yeah.
So much more easily. But no, it's an incredible lifestyle. And like, I love that side of it. And I think, it's not necessarily that it's a bitter pill to swallow, but it's definitely hard to see when, you're getting these or you're hearing these attacks or these arguments being made. And it is just coming from a place where there's, a lack of understanding, but there's no want to understand. It's just a lot easier for a lot of people to go, oh, well, this is what I've assumed it's like, therefore that's what it's like. And they haven't actually questioned themselves on going, okay, I heard, farmers are this, that, and the other. Are they actually?
Yeah. And again, I think that's just so much easier to do in the city. Got such an audience behind the camera. It's so funny.
I'm just happy to hang out with us.
So much easier in the city because you can talk all that shit and no farmer's going to be next to you.
No, and I think, I know it's one that, one of my best mates, she went to university to be a lawyer in Sydney. And whenever I'd go up to visit her, I was always the cow friend. And it was never said with anything rude, any derision. It was just that was the easiest way to identify me.
Sure.
But it did mean that, like I remember there being one time that we went over to a friend of her place for dinner and like on our way, she goes, oh, by the way, my friend's a vegan.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yep, no worries. Like that there's no skin off my nose. If you've made that life decision,
Sure.
Kudos to you, like power to you. It's not an easy thing to do. But anyway, and like I think it was the coolest thing that we were both able to sit down and she, obviously again, her friend knew me as the cow friend. So she was sort of like,
Yeah.
And I think
Did she have more of a problem with you than you?
No.
You had no problem. No.
I think it was one of those ones that because we both had this friend in common, we're like, well, Zoe like she likes me. We're all buddies, so like we've obviously got something in similar. We've obviously got some sorts of common ground here if if we're all being invited to the same thing. And so I think we both were just able to come at it very much from like a very open position and be like, hey, let's actually have a conversation about this. And I think it was just, one of the nicest dinners because, we were both able to go, hey, here is my opinion. Here's my experience. Ask me or ask questions. Go for it. And at the end of it, she was like, yeah, cool. Like, I do want to come and visit the farm. I do want to come and learn more.
Yeah.
And she wasn't, not becoming a vegan by any means because it's not my business.
Did she?
No, she came to the farm.
Yeah, okay,
like
cool,
she
yeah.
wanted, or I think we were trying to line it up. But yeah, like she was coming out and then, but like, it's not my business to go and try and convert you from veganism because that's
100%. No.
crazy. But it was definitely something that, the fact that she was able to come into the conversation and we're both just able to leave, preconceived notions on the table. Like, leave them at the door. Let's go and have a chat. And it was such a really positive chat that I'm like, yeah, cool. Like, at least I know she came away from that going, and not that her opinion was that necessarily beforehand, but it wasn't, farmers are these big bad people who are this, that, and the other. Like, she goes, oh, okay, like, I know a farmer now. Like, Em's a farmer. Like, I've got that.
It humanizes it, doesn't it?
It does.
If you watch all those vegan... I mean, I've been vegan before.
Yeah.
For a decent stretch of time. And not that I really got into them, but you can certainly watch all those, like, horror documentaries and stuff. But without having, used your own resource to see it, at least a version of it in real life, I mean, I think you're a bit of a fool, right? You said earlier as well, there's a certain demand that needs to be met.
Yeah.
There's a demand for beef. We need to meet it, so we'll meet it in the best possible,
Absolutely.
efficient, effective, humane
Absolutely.
way.
I think, we're like the demand for meat around the world isn't going anywhere. I mean, by 2050, they're expecting a global population of like 9 billion or something insane.
Mental.
And so when it comes to food security, like,
Sorry, the selfie camera on this.
oh, they are too funny.
If anyone's just listening, there are
I was going to say, I'm just going to get a photo so that
7
you guys
cows
can.
behind the phone camera setup that are
They're
just
here,
chewing grass.
so ready to help.
Literally looking like a camera cow. Oh, there we go.
Honestly, man.
So growing population, needing food.
Yeah, like I think it's one of the ones that, globally, this is going, the demand for meat is not going in.
Yeah.
There are always going to be, people, because we don't just use it for meat. I mean, like when you're looking at what a cow gets used for, I mean, like, there are parts of the cow, it gets used for medicine. It gets used.
Really? Medicine?
Yeah, absolutely. Like paracetamol, I think it is.
Oh.
There are, some of the, and I
Like
have no idea
Panadol?
how they do it. That is, again, so far above my pay grade, but there are so many different parts of the cow that we're able to use for so many different things. That, yeah, like I think it's sort of one that, we're really lucky that we have a natural product that we're able to use to create that. Like it is.
Because again, humans are getting to it feels such a pointy end of the stick in terms of technology and specialization.
Yeah.
Right? Those things that might be very nascent, just breathing into the tree, very, babies in the cradle, technological wise, but I guess threats to that demand for meat, like veganism and like lab-grown meat and stuff. Yeah. Where does that stuff sit with you? Well, we've already discussed veganism, but lab-grown meat, for instance.
Look, I think it's one that if it's safe and if it's going to be able to be done properly, it's an option for people. That at the end of the day, like, we've got this land, like the country that we're on at the moment, it can't be cropped.
Yeah.
The only thing it can really do.
Why is that?
It's just not good enough soil.
Okay.
And if you wanted to try and get a tractor up and down some of these hills,
yeah, you'd be in trouble.
It would not work. And so it is like, it's one of those ones that you're like, okay, if we suddenly decided that we weren't, going to, we weren't going to do livestock anymore, what would we be doing with all this land?
Yeah.
And, I think it's sort of something that I'm like, I don't know. I'm obviously very, very biased that I don't think you're going to be able to beat a real steak.
Yeah, no, it's all.
Man, quit.
I mean, fair enough, right? I mean, so often I think there is a push against, because there's such a technological edge happening.
Yeah.
I think it's pushing, like everything's reactions and reflections, it's pushing a lot of people back to be interested in nature and natural things. You've had this push maybe 10 years ago for veganism and lab-grown stuff, and then people realize, maybe it's not, at least in this current stage of it, that healthy for us. And now the common trend is carnivore and beef tallow and all this stuff. It's quite funny how it always goes in these extremes.
It cycles around, and I think it's like a really interesting one, and it's one that I absolutely love seeing. Is we are seeing a lot more, like direct to farm sorts of meat. Sorts of meat produce, that you're getting a lot more people who are actually interested in where their meat comes from and where their produce comes from, and so they're actually going out and sourcing, what farms are near me and selling something.
Yeah.
Or they're going back to their local butchers, or those sorts of little things. Like I think it's such a cool thing to kind of have happening.
Yeah.
That we're seeing that, sort of resurgence of that.
But it is a weird polarization, because it's as if there's a force that's going so far into the future and then it's leaving people behind, and those people are in the lost section. Okay, where did I last feel comfortable? Back. And they're going back to tradition. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of back to tradition, and it's back to what you know. And I mean, at the end of the day, like agriculture and farming has happened for thousands of years. Like it's not, it's absolutely changed. I mean, Australian farmers We're among some of the most efficient in the world. Like, we are, as an industry, like we're very, you've got people who are going, alrighty, what is the best way we can do this? What new technologies are available? What can we use? How can we use it to improve everything we're doing?
I think that's epic, that blend of cutting edge technology and something so traditional as farming. Are there
Yeah.
any more examples that kind of blow your socks off? And, when you see Elon Musk's launching rockets or
Yeah.
what's happening with AI, are there any things like that are really cool going on in the agricultural
Oh
world?
my goodness, there are so many like innovative people and things that are happening.
Who's the Elon Musk of farming? Is there someone that comes to mind?
There's not one individual person. I think there's a lot of businesses and a lot of industry that kind of go, okay, cool.
Or the chat GPT
What are
of farming,
the that too? No, there's no one thing. Like I think, like we're seeing like GPS is being used incredibly, and we've seen GPS in tractors for an awful long time just to make sure that when you're driving up and down, doing your harvest or, whatever you're doing, that your rows are going to be perfectly straight.
Right.
So that you're not
Do you
missing
even need
anything.
to drive the tractors anymore? Can you just
you need to sit in there.
Okay.
And
Do they kind of drive themselves?
Yeah, for a lot of it, they'll just they keep it moving. And it's always, it's still at the point where you don't, they're very expensive vehicles.
Yeah.
And you don't really just want to go, yep, cool, you got this.
Right, okay.
Yeah, like
How
it
much does
definitely,
the tractor cost?
some of the big the big ones, like a couple 100,000.
Yeah, I guess.
Like they're not cheap.
Yeah.
But yeah, like one of the, the things that I think is really cool, and it's probably more, or it's definitely more related to farming at the moment, is they're looking at putting like GPS in cattle ear tags.
Okay.
And so that, I'd be able to pull up, a map of my farm and see where all of my cows are standing. And, just some of the metrics they're able to check on with that they can see, how much is the cow standing up versus lying down, where have they walked, how much have they been walking. You're seeing just some really cool things that are going to make management.
The weeds of the fat content of the steak.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Stop.
That, if
We're
you
just
can hear it, is
gonna wait for that to go by. Lyra, good grief.
You can really you can imagine how you could get into the weeds of, I know how much exercise this cow's having, I know how much grass it's having, I know that these numbers are required for this marbling of the steak eventually.
Yeah, basically. There's a lot of different bits that go into it. And I think, some of the things that we're able to measure now is incredible. Like if you're looking at, one of the ones that they're actually measuring is basically the methane emissions per cow.
Wow, okay.
And so they're literally going through and creating like a genetic DNA score on, okay, this bloodline, this genetic or this line is typically they create more methane than this one. And so, like agriculture.
I can smell some methane from that cow.
Yep. But yeah, like, we're looking at being carbon neutral by, I think it's 2030.
New farms or Australia?
Australia.
Okay.
Yeah, like, or beef, what is it? The red meat industry is looking at being carbon neutral by then. And so I think it's sort of something that we're going, we see the writing on the wall. We can recognize that that's, something that's important. And so we're, naturally looking for, alrighty, how do we make those impacts? How do we make those changes ourselves? And, something like looking at it's like the red seaweed, to include that into cattle's diets, and it can reduce methane by, I think they said on some tests they found almost up to 80%.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, like those sorts of things, when they become commercially viable, like commercially available, I don't know anyone who's like going to not want that, because it's it helps.
Again, it's just so cool to hear that much intent and intellect and whatever is going into something that, as I say, is so often, I think, dismissed as just a racist old farmer somewhere.
Yeah, well, it's just sort of one of those things, people are very, very quick to be able to go, yep, cool, agriculture is the worst for this, this, and this. And we're like, yeah, we don't want to be, it's no one wants to say like, yeah, that's an us problem, and it's definitely not solely an agriculture problem, but it was definitely an issue that we were seeing and we could acknowledge, and we're like, yep, cool.
Okay.
Alrighty, what do we have to go through? Like, how do we change that? How do we go through and go, alrighty, what's next? What's going to be different?
No, as a spokesperson for the agricultural community, I'll give you a thank you and a congratulations. Now, you spoke of the land just before,
Mm,
and whenever I'm driving through Australia and farmland Australia, I always wonder what, and this might not be your area of
mm.
expertise, but what was this land before it was a farm? Was this fully forested and then, because I remember hearing stories about the first white settlers were basically told, if you clear it, you can have it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So like
Do
if
you
you
know what
look
this
at
was?
yeah, so this was if you look at kind of like those further back hills,
Yeah, they're pretty forest.
they're very forested. So that's basically what this place quite possibly was in its entirety, or at
Yeah.
least substantially more than it currently is.
Hmm.
Um yeah, no, it definitely it's a bit of an interesting one that when white settlers came, yeah, as you said, like it was very much you clear it right out, you can have as much as, as much as you basically.
That's how someone gets 2 million acres.
Yeah, I don't know whether that happened up there quite, but um, yeah, like I just think it's one of the, really interesting ones where you're like, okay, we bought this farm just over 30 years ago now, and it's been like it for substantially more than 30 years because like you're able to see when you've got trees down, they leave a mess.
Yeah.
So just for it to have been this clear for that long, I mean, I don't know whether anyone could tell you whether it was entirely forested or not at all, or what it actually looked like. We're just kind of going off, alrighty, what do the creek lines look like, and what do the back, some of the back paddocks kind of look like.
Yeah.
But
As a landowner, does that ever cross your mind? Do you ever think about before farming on this particular land, like what was going on, what stories?
we have actually tried a couple of times. So this is actually Ngunnawal country, where we are, and yeah, I mean, it was quite possible that it used to be. It was definitely not like a home ground for them. There hasn't been, enough artifacts found anywhere in this area
Okay.
that it was, a very heavily used, heavily hunted, sort of heavily, I guess, habituated area. But yeah, like I think it's sort of one that,
Like someone 20,000 years ago might have had their first kiss. Something like
yeah.
this,
Oh,
It's
absolutely. I
pretty
think of
cool.
that. Like, I think it's one of the ones that, yeah, like we've, sort of reached out to a couple of local groups to be like, hey, like, how do we get people to come out and tell us, what did this used to look like, or what did this, used to be? But it's, it's because of, like the colonization of this area. I think it originally in the Ngunnawal clans there were, thousands,
Mm,
and they got that right back to about 12 individuals.
12. So there's
Um,
currently 12.
No, no, like back in, I'm not quite sure what the actual date was, but I had researched that a little while ago now. But yeah, basically after, in one census, they got down to 12
Oh,
individuals who
wow.
lived
Oh my God.
within this region.
Yeah.
And
That's a
yeah,
thing.
like it's a huge, like that's heartbreaking. I mean, there's so much history that was lost. There is so much that we don't know about our land, and we will never find out. Like
Mm,
you're not going to be able to know. And I think it would be awesome to be able to go, yeah, cool. Like this is, a path they used to travel, or,
yeah.
that used to be used for X, Y, Z, or this used to be an area that was a trading post, or that, I mean, we sit there with the privilege of, basically being white and being
Yeah.
here for 200 years that
Yeah.
yeah, like that just doesn't exist anymore.
Are there, I think that was well put. Are there other white, more recent, that like local stories and things going on, and it might be just the crazy man next door who shot himself in the leg? Is there weird like stuff going
I
on?
think there's always, like
So I
at
feel like that's
each,
the best thing about farming. You know some cookers.
the weirdest things about not even everyone, but like you end up with all of those, random stories about that neighbor that,
Go on.
oh my goodness. No, I actually like my neighbors, and I like my neighbors liking me. I'm not about
No,
to
no,
tell
you
you
don't have to
anyone's
throw
dirty
everyone under the
logic.
bus, but
No,
there's
like
got to be
it's
some
actually
stuff.
pretty cool. So like, this whole area used to be big bushranger country.
Okay.
So like if you're looking at like collector
For
pub,
context, Bushranger is
bushranger as in
like Ned Kelly,
like Ben Hall.
Ben
Ben
Hall.
Hall was he was the bushranger in this area.
Wait, Bushranger's like kind of bandits, right?
Yeah, basically, broke the law, went and shot people. Not very nice people,
Yeah.
but
So like
you
in the
know,
Wild West, the equivalent of
yeah, like a lot of that. But yeah, like down at Collector, there was a big shoot off. There at some stage, and that was sort of like Ben Hall's last stand or one of his last stands. No,
That's
there's
a
like a
different
whole
time.
bunch of like it's crazy. I mean, and as far as like actual colonization goes, like this is one of the earliest places, like Goulburn, which is half an hour north of here,
Yeah.
gets to label itself as Australia's first inland city.
Really? Okay.
And so for this to be so close, like it was a fairly populated area very early on.
Yeah.
So I mean, like as far as I'm not even going to get into the Indigenous history side because that has been here for up to 60,000 plus years. Like it's incredible, and you can't fathom that. Like I'm sitting here trying to struggle to go, okay, what would it have looked like 300 years ago?
Yeah.
20,000, 40, 50, 60,000 years. It would have been
So
worlds apart.
So in respect of all that ancient history, you're still not willing to say a few crazy
No,
local stories?
no, I think I might plead the fifth on that one.
Oh, damn it. Okay, well, it's still on farming. I was with the cows this morning without you, and I was trying to, as I say, it's just so foreign. I know dogs, I feel, but I just don't know what the cow even is.
Yeah.
And I remember one scene from Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I think it's a wild buffalo somewhere, and he's going like that.
Yeah.
To try to control it or something.
Yeah.
Does that particular trick work? But are there other cool tricks about farming? This is how to hop over a fence real quick. I don't know.
I mean, I'm positive there's probably a trick for just about everything you want to do. I think if you look at, a lot of farmers, we're innovative people, absolutely. But
if you're maybe I'll put it better. If you're trying to impress someone about how good of a farmer you are, what's your go-to?
I don't even know if we have one like that. I think we're such small, such a small place out here that it's not really a consideration.
You don't have to like cowgirl wrangler.
No. I've never been able to rope or anything really cool like that. But that would be a cool one to do.
I won't say boring, but
but fair.
Yeah. No, interesting. Okay. Well, I guess this all leads us to what even living on a farm and your personal experience, putting in your shoes. Because for all its faults, there's plenty of people in the city. Right?
Yeah.
There's plenty of people to hang out with. It can feel very lonely if you don't know those people and not connected to those people. But what's community like on the farm? Where do you personally sit in that and find your place?
I think like agriculture in general, and I mean, you've got a whole bunch of different communities, and I mean, it's kind of the same with really anything that you've got your, I mean, and I could be wrong here, but I'm like, you've got your local communities. So like we've got an amazing group of neighbours that, we'll catch up with, and, we might go and, whether it's just stopping in for a glass of wine or, you need a hand, you've got a tractor bogged and you need someone else to come and pull you out type thing. Like there are people you can call, and there are people that you just know, whatever happens, they'd give you the shirt off their back.
Yeah.
And you do the same for them. Like it's definitely a two-way street there. So I think you've kind of got that side of community, and when you're kind of looking at like, the friendships you've got and whatnot, you're definitely a little bit more limited in just the number of people that are around. But the people that are around, you're typically going to have things in common with because, for a lot of it, you've grown up the same way and you've grown up fairly similarly. And, like one of my friends from primary, well, she's not even from primary school. She's from playgroup. Like we met each other when we were 3.
Wow.
And our mums happened to put us in playgroup together type thing.
Yeah.
She lived in Gunning and, or just out of Gunning on the other side, but like she's still one of my best friends, in the world, and she lives a little further away now. But like I think you've definitely got no shortage of quality. It's just trying to find the number of people and, but like I guess, kind of going on to, I don't know. I know we talked about this like a little bit, over some point over the last few days, but, like I don't think it's necessarily lonely. I think you just got to be a lot more intentional about the interactions you're having because, it is very easy to kind of get on the farm and just stay on the farm. And then it suddenly has been, a week since you've actually seen another person and you're like, oh yeah, I should probably go do that. So it might be something like, I'll go take my laptop and go work in Collector for the day.
Okay. Just
go work down at the cafe down there. Or I might, I very much very intentionally sort of go, okay, cool. Like I would like to do like one friend or one social thing per week. And I'm really fortunate that like my off-farm job is a very social job. So like working, with a lot of people, going out to their places, going out to farms, doing the photography and the marketing for them, you get really hands-on. So you do have a lot of contact with people through work, which is really fortunate for me because I'm a very social person and I love hanging out with people and seeing that.
Well, that's it. It just seems such an easy thing to... There's a nice little bird up there. Such a easy thing to slip into of just becoming a hermit, essentially.
Yeah.
And especially, someone in their 20s, that's such a different... Everyone I know in their 20s lives basically in a city, unless they live in a town with a very close-knit group of friends that they might basically with all the time. They're in a city where there's always people around, but always things to do and parties to go to and bars and everything. So it's such a different existence. And
I mean, it's sort of something that, if you want to go anywhere or do anything, you can. I mean, like Goulburn's only a half hour away, Canberra's an hour away. And I've got friends that live in both. So if ever if we were going out to dinner or something like that and, we wanted to have a few drinks or catch up, or I didn't want to drive home afterwards because it's not always a fun road to drive, like I can just go and stay with them. So I think there are definitely options, but yeah, you've just got to be that little bit more intentional about it. But, when the payoff is getting to live out here, it's not a bad, not a bad option.
Is that a thing that happens as well? If you've grown up here all your life, is there a thing where these lifelong friends or childhood friends grow up and leave? Like go to the city or something, go to the big smoke? Or...
Yeah, I think honestly, if you look at any small town, like it's not necessarily just a farming or an ag thing. Like if you look at any small town, you'll see a lot of people, going to find different and going to go and find, like the opportunities we have in Goulburn and not the opportunities you're going to have in Sydney.
No.
And like I even look at like, my little sister, like, she grew up on the farm here with me and then I went to university up in Armidale and studied ag business, and she went to university in Sydney and studied paleobiology and absolutely is killing it.
There's not exactly jobs for that degree.
But no, Gunning isn't a hot spot for paleo, unfortunately.
No, which is dinosaur stuff.
Which is, the life and evolution of dinosaurs, basically. So she's now a science communicator, which, I mean, she comes actually, it's been pretty cool. She's actually been able to come out and talk to the kids at Gunning cool. about opportunities in STEM and opportunities in science.
Yeah.
So it's cool, I think a lot of people who leave these areas, like you come back in some regards.
Yeah.
And even if it is for a weekend. But yeah, like it's definitely still there, but no, an awful lot of people leave. And, I think if that's where it's going to take you, and I think it's, it's a bit of a growth thing. Like I left and I came back.
Okay. Was that just to uni? Like,
yes, I was away at university for 3 years and then came back for a bit and then moved out to Orange for a bit, went overseas a number of times throughout all of that.
Yeah. So there hasn't always been such a set in stone thing. Yeah, this is like...
I think it's always been something that I wanted to do. And so it's definitely been something that, because it is, mum runs the farm. And so, kind of once I realized that this was sort of something I wanted to do, it would be, prioritizing, all righty, what times of year do I need to be home or at least need to be available? Yeah, just to be able to come home and help. And I mean, like the drought was a good example. Like we're feeding out everything on the farm every day for 2 years.
Wow.
Like that
what
was...
What does feeding out mean?
Feeding, so like it means that we were buying in hay.
Okay.
We had sold off everything that we could sell and we'd kept kind of like our core herd, but we're like, yeah, we'll feed them through. And so, yeah, you're buying in hay from effectively WA or from wherever you're buying it, and your only job. And I mean, these paddocks were dirt. Like it was a miserable time to be here.
That's kind of hard to imagine, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It was the hardest thing. I mean, you're looking out and you're going, cool, there's nothing you can do that day before you go feeding your cows. And it weighs heavy on you because you're just like, there's no end in sight. It's nature. Like, there's you're not guaranteed rain. You're not guaranteed anything. So, the drought will break eventually. But like the mental side of that game is a huge one that you've kind of got to go, you can prepare for it. And we did prepare for it as best we could. And I mean, we've as soon as that broke, like we're preparing for the next one because you know it's going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
But it's just a matter of, alrighty, like how do we get through that as, you know, happy, healthy people
So
as best we can.
how long was that drought?
A couple of years. It
2
was about
years.
two and a half, I
So it
think,
didn't
years.
rain at all for two and a
It
half years?
rained very lightly, intermittently, but yeah, it was no rain at times that would cause anything to grow.
And when it's easy to imagine you're in the dry, you're in the shit, and then one day suddenly it gets cloudy and there's rain, you go outside, it's like, yes, we're out of it. But was there a peak moment, or did it kind of just start raining a bit more and
I think it's one of the ones that, like, by the end of it, so it was a really weird time because, you know, like there wasn't a lot of, like, there's not a lot of government help when it comes to drought.
Okay.
For a lot of things. So it's sort of something, you know, you're there paying, you know, you might get some subsidies, but you're not getting your feed paid for. You're not getting anything like that. And not that I necessarily, like, you know, it makes us competitive. Like, it's sort of something that, again, you know, we had to prepare for, and you've built up for that.
But they're happy to buy the bankers out, but not the farmers.
Yeah, well, it's sort of one of those ones that, you know, there've been a lot of calls for, and there are people who had it a lot worse than us. Like, I'm not pretending we're the worst by far.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are a lot of people just being like, please help us. Just we don't have the answer, but like, what can you do to help? And it was sort of one of those really frustrating ones where you're just like, cool, like we're not being seen, no worries. And it was right around the start of 2020 because it was basically like we left, we were actually traveling over in Africa as a family. Right at the end of 2020, we went sort of early December and we got back mid-January. And
Go back January of 2020.
Yeah. And it was when all the fires were, that was that, you know,
right, yeah.
bushfires coast to coast just about. And so, you know, we had left and you couldn't see, you know, half the back hill because it was so deep in smoke.
Wow.
And so it's just such a, you know, crazy time that, yeah, it's dirt, it's smoke, everything was red, everything was dusty. And we left, and yeah, by the time we came back, there'd been a little bit of rain, and it's starting to go, okay, like maybe this will be a spring. And then it just started raining more and more, and we're like, oh my God, like this might stick. But like you're so
Callous.
So just like you don't want to be optimistic because you're like, no, like if I look at it in the eye, like it'll stop, it'll go again, we'll be back into it. But it broke, and it was, you know, I mean, you know, we were very lucky we didn't flood, but then there were people that, because you'd had 2 years of no rain, the ground was so heavily compacted that when it did rain, it slid straight off, and so it caused floods. So it's
cruel, isn't it? It's like,
oh, it was crazy. And then COVID hit, and suddenly the government was handing out money left, right, and centre. And again, like very thankful that they did, but it was just such a crazy one that, you know, we'd all been here being like, alrighty, like some help would be great, and like, oof. We can't do that quickly.
Us, you know.
Yeah, like, I think it was just that it was everywhere. Like I said, like most droughts, you know, when we've had droughts in the past, we might have had a really intense drought, but there are areas that aren't in drought, and it's all a bit of a balance.
So just for context, because that sounds horrible, and again, it's not like we don't hear about droughts on the news, but at least me, maybe because I'm just young and dumb and have always been in the city, but I get the sense that majority of people who live in a city just don't really think about it that much, to be honest. That's why like the actions aren't.
No, and I mean, again, I think it's sort of one that, you know, we're like agriculture, it only employs like 2.5% of
Probably they
the
care about it when they realise that things at the supermarket cost more. And they're like,
yeah. Oh, I think it's not even like we were seeing an awful lot of people caring. It was just really hard to kind of keep that in mind, I guess. Sure. Like, you know, when your day to day is so, you know, okay, cool. Like I've really got to keep things alive. I've really got to just make sure that, you know, your dams are running out of water. Like it's not even just that there's no feed, there's no water. So you're buying in water, you're buying in feed. Like, you know, your expenses are, you know, 4 times what they normally are type thing. Like you're there going, cool, like how the hell do we make this work? And yeah, like it was a crazy time to even be working in like the marketing side of things, because it was definitely one that I would go through and I would work with people. And you kind of almost became like a little bit of a therapist because, you know, I feel like a photographer, I usually tell people it's kind of like you're like the barman. You're a person who's there and they're involved, but you're not, you know, necessarily right with them. And so, you know, I was really happy to be able to be, you know, if people needed to unload on someone, that they had that. But, you know,
did you cop anger for that, or was
no, I copped nothing nothing like that. I think, everyone was in the same boat. So they were just, we're all just trying to go, okay, cool. Like, let's just get it out the other side. Let's just keep going.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was talking to a livestock buyer at the time, and he said, he would just call up all his clients and be like, even though I can't buy anything, I'm so sorry, but hey, mate, how you doing? And I know he said, that he'd had a few calls that, if it didn't get answered, he'd start freaking out and, calling friends and family of theirs just to be like, hey, please tell me he's just away from his phone. And
Yeah, because I think I heard a stat ages ago that farming, or at least modern farming, has a high suicide rate.
yeah, massively high.
Really?
I think it's one of the ones, like, it's just sort of, you've got a lot of responsibility. I mean, like, we've got 100 cows on this property and I'm responsible for all of them. Like, we're responsible for all of them. And, again, like, you've seen a really lovely day today where everything's gone well and, the cows come and hang out and
Didn't have much milk.
didn't have much milk, but no, they'd already fed their babies for that one. So, but yeah, I was like, you're seeing, a really nice day on the farm, and this has been really lovely. But I think it's one of those hard ones that it's not always like that.
Yeah.
There are days where you've got an animal that's been hurt and you can't save them, you can't fix them. And so, you might have to call the vet to, come and put them down or something like that. And that's not fun. I mean, like, you're going to end up those sorts of days where you're a mess and you don't want to talk to people. But you're also really fortunate that you do have a community of people that you can turn back and go, hey, this was shit. I hate this. And they can sit there and they'll commiserate with you because they've probably been through it themselves. Like,
well, if the mental health and suicide stuff is so high, do you get the sense that because that's definitely happening in the city and all sorts of populations as well. Do you think that because obviously farming is hard, as you just said, has that always been the case, do you reckon? Or do you reckon it's a modern phenomenon? And if so, why?
No, I think we talk about it more.
Okay.
I think it's sort of one of the things that we see it more because we talk about it more. It's, kind of like with anything, like, when you're driving around, if someone is playing punch buggy, suddenly yellow cars are everywhere.
Yes.
When you start talking about mental health and actually bringing it to the forefront of people are suddenly going, oh, I get that. Like, I know what that is. I know what that means. So, like, I think if we're looking at across the board, I don't necessarily, and I mean, I think people possibly are more depressed than they used to be, but I also think it's just sort of something we're actually bringing it to the forefront now and going, hey guys, this is what mental health is. This is what it looks like. This is what it might mean for you. This is what it means for us. And when you're able to talk about it, then suddenly other people are going, oh, like they've said they had issues with mental health. Hold on, like I can relate. I can talk about that.
Is that a good thing?
Massively.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think it's sort of one of those ones that, it was always there just because we didn't have a name for it or we didn't have something like that. You'd have, a dad or someone at home and, maybe they drink through their problems. I think we kind of give it a name and give it a face and say it's not this big scary thing anymore. You're actually then letting people go, okay, there are answers to this.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one going through it. I'm not crazy. I'm not this, that, or the other. Like, and I mean, that's not a country thing. That's an everyone thing.
I think it was so impressive and surprising to hear about all those technological advancements and modernization of farming and things. Is there an equivalent, and like that outreach and media outreach, for instance, that podcast, is there an equivalent kind of revolution, modern wave happening with that mental health side amongst the farming community?
I would say, like, if you're kind of looking at, I guess, like kind of my age group, like, some of the things that people are doing and just getting out, like one of the, and I can't actually remember what she won as Woman of the Year, but they've got this great movement called Sober in the Country. And they're kind of obviously tackling alcoholism.
Yeah, cool.
You've got The Naked Farmer, and they're going through and just bringing mental health awareness and starting those conversations about, hey guys, like this is what mental health looks like. This is what it is. And I think you've got a lot of things that are happening and kind of going, it's not this big scary thing anymore. And I mean, it still is a big scary thing, especially because, if you don't know what's happening inside your own body, it feels like it's turning on you. It's big and it is scary, but it's also something that when you've got people in the public eye that are talking about it and addressing it, I think it's so important for people to be able to go, oh, hold on, like they went through something similar. I can talk to them about it, or I can ask them and I can go, where did you get help? How did you do it?
It strikes me that in the city, it often feels like nature's not really so relevant, and it's humanity and it's society that makes or breaks you and crushes you
Yeah.
or doesn't. Here, obviously, drought and all the realities of farming, nature's such a big wielder of power over your life. But then because you're farming, you're into the economy and you're a human who just has
Yeah.
social sides, you're also dealing with human societies and economies. So you're kind of copying the best, but also the worst
Yeah.
from both.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think it is definitely something like, I don't want it forgotten. Like, you are getting the best of people. Like, I was like, when a disaster happens in agriculture, like if you see your neighbor's place up in fire, there used to be a local guy here, and, if something was on fire, like he used to be, I think, one of the fire captains, and basically, aged out of that.
Yeah.
When there was a fire on, he showed up with a barbecue and had lunch cooking for everyone before the fire showed up. Like, he was there ready to go. And I mean, it was sort of something, he was like, yep, cool, we're all ready. Like, we're going to have, we've got the community here.
Yeah.
Like, you are seeing the best of people.
Wait, so someone's house is burning down?
No, like property. Like, you'd have a paddock on fire or something like
okay.
that, because it just goes over the radio. And I mean, farmers or everyone would just show
And
up
he
with a
starts
water
doing
tank.
a cook up.
Yeah, he'd be there. Like I said, like he used to be, running sort of like one of the volunteer fire brigades. So like he used to show up first with the truck, and then he'd show up first with the barbecue and just ready to go.
But
and
he wasn't really worried about, like, other people would bring the water and the fire.
Oh, everyone else. No, like that's definitely an exaggeration. Like, he would show up and make sure it was all under control. But yeah, like if something's on fire here, the whole community shows up for it.
Yeah.
Like, it's, you're not just getting the fire brigade show up. You're going to get your neighbors are all showing up with, whether they've got a little tank or a big tanker.
Yeah.
They're like, cool, what do we do to help?
Yeah.
You'll see like crop fires up in Queensland or, up on big acre, like broadacre properties. You'll see 3 or 4 tractors from neighbours, whatnot, just coming in and trying to create fire breaks. Like, when those sort of issues happen, you do have an awesome support network there. But yeah, as you said, like, the issues you're copping can be from people, or it can be from the economy, from business, from like you can get it from every angle. But you do have, I think, the support there. And again, like, I've not really lived in the city, so I can't say that whether you have it or not.
I think it helps because, yes, you get the downside from the city, but you get the upside. But I would argue that the upside from nature is way better than the upside from the city. If that makes sense.
I mean, I would agree. I will always pick living out here over living in Sydney or anything like that. Love to visit, but love to leave.
Yeah, cool. And I guess I love that tangent, but when people leave from the city, do people come in from elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we've got Gunning, which is 10 minutes up that way.
Because obviously people are born, so there's
there's people that are born, but I'm like, I think there are a lot more people now that are also realising that this lifestyle is a pretty bloody cool one.
Yeah.
And so we are seeing a lot more people going, alrighty, cool, like, I want to get in on this. How do I get in on it? So we're seeing a heap of young families coming in, and we're seeing, retirees coming in, moving out. And so you are getting, like, new people coming into the communities and going, and they're setting up lives here. They're setting up, basically.
How's that? You say that quite positive, your tone, but how's that going? I imagine there's a bit of contention around that stuff.
I think it's more of an individual personality thing. Okay. I think, like, some of the people that have moved here in the last few years are truly, like, the best of people. Like, they are so kind, and they are, just great people to have around, and they are young families, and, like, they're just, it's beautiful to see them getting to raise their kids in the way that I was being able to raise. Like, I appreciate that so much.
So these are like Sydney people, for instance?
Yeah, people from sort of here, there and everywhere. And I think, it, like I said, like, it definitely depends on the personality. Like, if you're the sort of person that's going to come and move out to the city or move out to the country and tell everyone how it's going to be and, go and start changing everything and go, this is what I'm doing and screw the rest of you type thing. Well, you're probably going to not make a lot of friends very quickly. But if you come in and, like, we've had people move in and they kind of just reach out to be like, hey, like, I've just moved in down the road. Would you like to catch up? And yeah, like, I think that side of it's lovely.
I'm going to set fire to my paddock, and then I think there's a guy going to start a barbecue.
Yeah, like, that's how we make friends, right? Yeah, no, I think it's something that's really cool that, you're kind of, if you come into it, with an open mind and happy to learn and want to work and want to take this lifestyle, like, absolutely. I think people can be super welcoming, but like, I think it's just a lot more of an individual personality thing than a one size fits all for that.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, cool. And we've already spoken a fair bit about this, but
Yeah.
again, as a young person in this thing, what's going on in dating? Because dating's already I mean, I haven't really got into it, to be honest.
Mm.
And it just seems so bloody weird in every context. But this is a different one. You know, is it real? Has it moved past the days of boy meets girl and school and country town and go to a drive-in cinema and then that's it? Like, you
Well,
know,
I don't think we have any drive-in cinemas around here, so
yeah.
you might be out of
But you
luck on
know
that
those like
front.
small
But
town movies.
yeah, no, I mean, like if I look at, you know, kind of like a lot of the kids that I went to like high school with, you know, there are definitely people that got together in high school and have been able to stay together, and like all power to them. And yeah, like I think, you know, obviously you have a smaller town, your dating pool is that much more limited, but
Then you throw in something like online dating.
you throw in online
Where
dating
the
and that's
dating
just a
pool's
whole
now
different,
everyone.
yeah, it's a different kettle of fish. And I mean, you know, there are obviously the pros and the cons. Like, I know, as you said, we talked about this, but it was something I'm like, you get to go on dates with people that you might not have, you know, they're not in your local area. You wouldn't have probably met them by chance anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you get to meet some really, really cool people, which I think is awesome. But yeah, you're also, you know, then trying to go through and go, okay, cool. Like what might that actually look like in the long term or anything like
Are
that?
you,
And that's all.
if you go on an online date, for instance, with someone who's not here,
Mm,
just as when you go to Sydney with that friend and you're just cowgirl,
mm.
is that the vibe on those dates as well?
No, like I typically will, like if I'm, you know, like dating somebody, I think it's usually like somebody that's of a similar mindset and similar interests to me. Like there aren't very many times when I'm going to, you know, date somebody who has only ever lived in the city and has no interest in agriculture or something like
Yeah.
that, because agriculture is such a huge part of my life. Like I don't, you know, I don't want to have to kind of go through and be like, hey, like, you know, this isn't something you like. Well, cool. Like we'll be able to make it work anyway, because that won't work.
No, yeah.
No, so I think it's definitely tricky, but it's also one that you're like, well, unfortunately, that's just the name of the game now, really,
Yeah.
I guess.
And what was I going to say? Um, yeah, okay. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, that's right. Like, there's always a sense, I think, when you're young and looking at, like, dating and whatnot, is that you kind of both usually got nothing essentially, and then, maybe we want to go the same direction, so we build that together. But in your situation, having a farm,
Yeah.
you have a whole lot of something, right? And so, as you say, you're not going to give this up for someone, right? And maybe you can improve it together, but you're not going to build it together because it's kind of already
Yeah.
built. Is that, do you feel like that is a weird one?
It's definitely one that, yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I think it's
Do you understand?
No, I know exactly
Yeah.
what you mean. And I think it's, yeah, like it's definitely an interesting conversation that I've had with people before, because it is one you're like, well, you know, like this is a family farm. This isn't my farm just yet. And it's, you know, you've got to kind of take all of that into consideration. And it's not that, you know, like I wouldn't move for the right person, but it's like you'd have to be an awful lot of the right person and have, you know, for that to make sense.
You'd have to have a better farm somewhere.
You'd have to have something going on. Yeah, absolutely. But no, like I think it's sort of, it puts probably a lot more, I think it means that I date more intentionally. You know, because again, like this is a lifestyle that is not for everyone. And not that, you know, you want to go on the first date to be like, cool, like, do you want to get married and move to the farm?
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think it is kind of like a little bit at the back of your head that you're like, well, you know, if if rural life isn't for someone, that's absolutely fine. But at the end of the day, they're not my person.
Yeah. Have you watched Farm Wants a Wife?
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't really, but what maybe back in the day?
Oh my Lord, it's chaotic.
What's
it's
that
good
make
watching,
you?
but
Do you relate? Like,
no.
no.
I'm enough of a mess when it comes to dating in my private life. There is no way you could pay me any amount of money to do that on
So you
national
wouldn't do
television.
Farm Wants a Husband?
Nope.
Have
No.
they released that yet?
Pardon?
Have they released that yet? Or do
No,
girls
but
go
they
on it?
have women on there.
Okay, yeah.
But no, like it's one of the ones, I mean, every year they go casting for it, and every year, me and all of my single friends still get, everybody gets asked.
Really?
Absolutely. They
Oh,
recruit
cool.
for it, no doubts.
Yeah,
They'll sort of,
wow.
you get the message to be like, hey, do you want to be a farmer this year?
Yeah.
You're like, no, still no. And, a month later or whatnot, they'll be like, hey, do you want to apply for a farmer this year? Like, here they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, it's obviously like it's a process that works for some people. Like, they've had some awesome success stories from it. And
Have they actually?
yeah,
Wow,
absolutely.
okay,
They've
cool.
had some really happy couples out of it, and
Yeah.
and power to them. Like, I think that's so cool, but it's just I can't see that
Maybe
working
this is
for me.
practice. This is a practice run.
I don't think so. Oh man, I don't think. Yeah,
That'd be fun.
I don't think the video is it for me somehow.
Oh my goodness. And I know you touched on it before, the whole loneliness thing. Do you have anything, I guess, with all that context now, do you have anything more to say on like the relationship with loneliness out here?
I think I don't know. I think when you're out of this part of the world, or really any kind of farm, a lot of the time, but you get really comfortable being by yourself. And so I don't think it's sort of something that I'm like, I don't necessarily get lonely. And I mean, I'm a people person, so I love people and I love seeing people. And like, yeah, absolutely, there are times you can get lonely, but that's usually when I'm like, okay, I really just need to go visit my people.
Yeah.
And whether that is just going over to one of the girls' places and say, hey, we're just doing a movie night, or going for a hike with some friends, or whatever that looks like. There are so many things, but I think it's sort of something that I'm really fortunate that I've got enough people around me that I can just say, hey, cool, like I just need a people day.
Yeah.
And we can go and do that. And I think that's sort of, a bit knowing my boundaries, but like I said, like it's something that, I'm here and I like my own company, and yeah, like the house that I'm in up there, like it's my space, and like I love having my little space.
I think the way I envisage that actually going down is quite good, because you know how to be on your own, and then when you recognize internally you want people, you have good quality, as you said, people with intention behind it, as opposed to perhaps in the city where you probably don't know how to be on your own because you're just never on your own. And then, so if you ever find yourself on your own, usually it puts people into a bit of a tailspin, because you're in a, why are you alone in the city? You're
I think it's one of the ones, like, and honestly, again, like not living there and not having my people or my networks there, I find cities can be some of the loneliest places.
Right.
Like, I know when I'm traveling, like I've felt substantially more alone, like in New York City, than I have out in the middle of Kansas.
For sure, because the nature of it is that you might always have an event you can go to.
Yeah.
But none of them, all your closest friends, or you just don't have the opportunity to make those really close bonds. And
and I think, I mean, so much of the time is like, it's such, especially, when you're only there visiting, or thanks, girls. When you're only there visiting or anything like that, like a lot of the connections you're making, or a lot of the connections you have can be kind of superficial connections.
For sure.
It's like you go into the shops and them just being like, hey, how you going?
Yeah.
Or, the waitress asking how you want your coffee, or like you're seeing people and you're around people, but you're not around people.
You're not
like,
connected.
You're not connecting, and you get the people, giving you the little smiles and a wave, but yeah, like I think it's, one of the things I love about here is, like, and I do laugh at it, that like I used to work at the pub in Collector, and it was one of my favorite things, because you get to know everybody and you get to see everyone, and you're just like, everyone, like you go and you run into the cafe, like go into the cafe there.
Do a good job, hey.
It's a lot of fun. But yeah, like, you go down to the pub there, or you go into the cafe in town, and there's, not very many times that you're there that you don't know a bunch of people. And
it's like school, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like this little environment where you can still have those little smiles and little connections with the people kind of on your periphery, but even they are closer than random strangers in a city of 5 million people. And then your close friends are really close, and you get to see them all the time because you're so close. It's No,
I think it's, I mean, it's cool. Definitely like I feel like I get the best of both worlds. But like, I mean, it is also one that, like COVID was a really weird example in that, if you wanted to go out, like I think when we were on lockdown, stuck on your farm.
Yeah.
Like you can't go visit people. Like it was such a weird one where you were really entirely alone. And I
Yeah.
mean, you know, I feel like the city was such a sort of different sort of alone that at least then you were kind of like, you know, at least then you're like, maybe I will take the superficial connection and just be like, it's someone, it's something.
Yeah.
Whereas like that side of lockdown was such a weird one. And I mean, I was really fortunate that, you know, once they sort of started opening up to essential workers, I was classified as an essential worker. Because I work in agriculture marketing. So if they're not allowing people to, you know, hold cattle sales or anything like that, you know, we had to do all online selling. And so they needed photos and videos to do that. And
Cool.
here I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, it made for a really strange one for a little bit there where you're like, cool, like I'm not allowed to leave.
So cute. Baby cow behind us.
Baby.
It's like a Bambi, isn't it?
Hey.
Kind of has like a deer eyes.
Yeah. Needs to get rid of his winter coat.
Does he? It's a bit chilly.
His cute babies.
Yeah, COVID was not ideal.
Yeah, it was a strange old time, honestly.
Do you apply much of this stuff to the pace of life as well? I find that the nature of I just feel my heartbeat on average is probably bloody 10 clicks quicker, you know? Like it's just so in the air.
Yeah.
And I think that means that those connections just don't have time. This is my next question, I guess, and this kind of links in. Your relationship with boredom. I was listening to something yesterday and it was saying that the flip side or the other side or there's a direct link between boredom and peace. Like you can't really have peace if you don't know how to be bored.
Yeah.
The guy was saying. And I back that because if you aren't willing to let yourself be bored, you're always distracting yourself with something or someone or whatever. Well, then how you ever create the environment that is required for peace? So
I think definitely to an extent, but also I'm probably the last person to talk on that because I am so good at finding things to do. And I think if you look at honestly any farmer, you know, like especially like if it's a nice day, you know, you're going to be off pottering around. There are always jobs to be done. There are always, you know, probably 30 things.
Bored out here?
No.
Really?
There's always things to be done. And I mean, you know, there might not always be fun jobs, but you're on a farm with a whole bunch of, you know, anywhere from sort of 650 to a ton animals. They wreck fences. There's wood that needs to be cleared up and there's, you know, creeks that need to be checked and made sure they're, you know, they're running and they're not, you know, blocked up or anything like that. And
I know a lot of people.
There's always jobs to do. So it's sort of something that you go, you know, there's very rarely, and I mean, we're very lucky that this is a small farm. And so, you know, the number of jobs we do isn't nearly as big.
I know a lot of people who will have discipline and motivation for like maybe one area of life that maybe is the one that makes them money, but for everything else are pretty bloody hopeless. And it doesn't seem like that's even a possible. Like you can't even do that. You can't exist like that on a farm. Is that just the way you were raised, or the way you're forced into it, or do you actively like the fact that you have the discipline to get out of bed to fix the farm even though it's raining, or fix the fence even though it's raining?
I think it's definitely. I mean, it's definitely something you're kind of raised doing because it's something that has always had to be done. Like I think when you're kind of working through it and you're like, well, you know, like I do have to get up. Like these cows do have to be fed. There's not actually two ways about that. Like,
because even that, and a lot of what you're saying, how I'm hearing it of the pros and cons of farming, because there are cons and there are pros, but all of them seem so much more human. And if you abide by those rules of the game of life, it's just set up in such a way to optimize kind of human flourishing. And because you can still go down the path of crazy modern technology if you so desire, but just being at peace and being a holistic, healthy individual seems to just be inbuilt into the system.
To an extent. I mean, I think you can look at, you know, there's an awful lot of people who live on farms who aren't necessarily healthy because they are running themselves into the ground and they are, you know, like the stress of the job, like it is a stressful job. And again, like we're a pretty easy farm in the scheme of things, but you know, when you've got 1,000 head or something like that, you've got to make sure things are running smoothly and you've got people who are relying on you. And I think there are definitely an awful lot of like stressful things around it that you do need to kind of balance. And I think that's kind of where the mental health side of it a lot more of the mental health in ag, it does come from loneliness if you don't have those connections. Or it also comes from just stress on making sure that everything does keep running, because again, like, it's beautiful when you just get to let your cows out in a paddock and they just get to be cows. But when you are running around feeding everything every day, if something happens to you, then suddenly, you're like, cool, like, I need to, like, it's not an option. Like, if, we've had days where I've been really sick and mum's been away, or mum's had broken ribs or something like that. Like, if I'm not here, mum still has to go and feed the cows with broken ribs.
Yeah.
Or if mum's away, I've got to feed the cows,
It's just that direct responsibility, because I think it was Charlotte's episode.
Yeah.
That's certainly an idea I've always had in my head of, if it's always if the default is pain and suffering, and this is straight Nietzsche, Jordan Peterson stuff, but because there's always bad days, there's always broken ribs, there's always rain and whatnot. The only antidote to that is meaning.
Yeah.
You have to, like, okay, this sucks, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
And what makes it worth it? Well, responsibility. And in a city life, again, if it's a fake life almost, if it's a not intentionally created life, if it's a job that doesn't really matter for anything, then it's more difficult, it's more indirect, that link between the responsibility you have and the actual meaning behind it.
Yeah.
Yes, I have the responsibility to pay the rent, but I can always be homeless. And yes, I have the responsibility to show up for work, but no one actually is going to matter. Like, it's not going to matter. Where here it's like, no, the cows are going to be hungry.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, like,
I think that's why
you're able to kind of come at it from a perspective of, being young and single. Like, as soon as you've got a family relying on you, like, that suddenly you've got that responsibility. You do have to, like,
even if
work
the work
isn't an
doesn't
optional
matter,
anymore, even if it doesn't work. Does matter. Exactly. Like, I think that kind of, I mean, we're saying this, like, kids change everything. Like, that's just a whole different, having someone or something rely on you. And I mean, I've had friends who live in the city and, like, getting a dog, like, for just the mental health, that suddenly they get out at the end of the day and, like, no, I actually do need to go for that walk.
Yeah.
Because my dog needs to go for a walk.
It's actually a great point, because I was saying this to you yesterday, like, it doesn't really make sense to not be a parent of some kind in life.
Yeah.
I think that's where it is, to not have responsibility, whether it's cows, whether it's dog, whether it's kids themselves. These are all just so, that's probably what I'm getting at when I say it's structured for the human flourishing, is just responsibility. It really weirds me out when people, and you can only really, by definition, can only find them in a city. Yeah. Where they seem to have responsibility over nothing but their own happiness, whatever that even means. Right?
Yeah, especially when it changes so much person to person.
Right. So it's like, I want to be happy. That's all I'm optimizing for. And therefore, what does that mean? Getting drunk this night, and does that mean sleeping with this person casually? Does that mean just, like, doing this thing for money? Like, if there's no higher thing, or you could argue lower thing, but something to be responsible and answerable to, it kind of screws people.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, you can do that. And I do think it's just sort of one of those ones that, I mean, like, I'm privileged enough to get to call this home, and this is sort of what I've grown up doing, so I haven't known another way. So there are so many of those things that I can't compare to, but
because you haven't seen when that's, because everyone in this environment is, to some degree, by the nature of not having cows die on them through their own inaction and inadequacy, got their head screwed on right.
Yeah.
Whereas,
well, I think I was saying this earlier, I'm like, if you live out on a farm, I mean, like, you have to be at least a vaguely useful person, and you don't have to be useful in the way you know everything, but you have to be very much like a figure it out person, or a try to figure it out person, because, like, if we have a pipe break or something like that, like, it might take me 2 days to get a plumber to come out.
Yeah.
Like, if, you have, like, your car won't start, or you need to jump start something, or you need to go and replace a battery. Like, there are so many of those things that you need to be able to go, okay, this isn't right. What am I going to do about it? Like,
in a city, you can be a crazy person. You can be the most, I mean, especially in Australia, such a rich country, government handouts and all the rest of it. I mean, there's nothing, what's stopping you from just eating cheeses and playing video games on a bed all day and receiving whatever it is, $800 a fortnight? Like, just, I mean, that's crazy that you can do that there, but not here.
It's an interesting one.
But-
But yeah, no, it's not for me. I don't think I'd be able
No.
to sit still for that long.
No. Okay. This is a question I've asked to most guests, and it's a bit of a
Yeah.
big one. We obviously know you're responsible for these cows. But some people will say it's a god, some people will say it's nature, whatever that is. Some people will say it's their own potential, but to what entity do you think you're kind of most answerable? At the end of the day, when does the question?
Yeah, no, it does. I think it kind of like comes in two parts. I think I'm very much of the belief that the universe will kind of give you everything that you need, and it might not give it to you when you want it, but it will help you make it work. But when it actually comes to being answerable to, I would probably say, like, and I guess this being a family business kind of changed things a little bit, but like I would say like leaving a legacy, and I don't necessarily mean in a family respect, but I want to be the sort of person that at the very end of the day, when all is said and done, people can look back on and be like, yeah, she was great. We liked her, or she did positive things, or she left a positive mark. Like I'm very much, everything I do, I want to be able to say that I left it better than I found it. And whether that is friendships, whether that's relationships, whether that's, the land that we get to be on. Yeah, like I think it's sort of something that I'm like, I want to be able to go, okay, cool, like, grandkids are sitting there at the end of the day being like, yeah, like she did some really cool shit. And for it to have battered, like, I want the changes that I made, to be positive, but I want them to, to actually have done something genuinely good. I don't know whether that answers that,
Right.
but
Yeah, I really like that. I'm all out of questions. Is there anything else you'd love to say and speak about?
I don't think so. I think, it's sort of one of those special ones that we kind of get to, we don't get a lot of times to talk to random people about what it's like living out on the farm and answering a lot of ag questions possibly quite badly, but definitely mostly hopefully all right, and hopefully it makes sense. But
It made a lot of sense to me. It's one of those ones where sometimes it's a real discussion. It's a back and forth. I'm sharing ideas, you're sharing ideas. Sometimes I'm just like, wow,
fill me in.
Yeah, because you're coming at it from stuff that I can maybe try to link it with some meta stuff, but I think just the answers was good to be left.
We can go cows 101. Happy to do that anytime.
Yeah, I love that.
But yeah,
Cool. All right.
How good.
Thank you. I'm gonna swing the camera around. They're not fully here yet.
Off they go again.
Nice.